Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Wednesday, middle of the week, one day closer to college football this Saturday. We're another day closer to Notre Dame kicking off their season against Wisconsin up at Lambeau Field a week from Sunday. And today's show, guys, it's going to be so much fun. We're going through player predictions for 2026. Part one of today's show, we're talking offense. Part two of today's show, we're talking defense. And then we're talking national standouts in part three. And we're talking top freshmen, top breakouts. We're going to give a little kind of stat projection in there, talk about some big game performances, who might lead the season on the team in this category on offense and defense. This is going to be a really fun show. All projection. We're having a lot of fun today. And while we're going through these, we'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the chat too, because there's a lot of room for differing opinions here.
Yeah, and I know one person that's in the chat today will literally predict an Ohio State player for every single position. So I know his top quarterback's going to be Julian Sand, Bo Jackson, a running back, Jeremiah Smith, a receiver. He might get one right. That's for sure. But no, we're gonna have some fun. We thought about, instead of giving awards, who's going to win the Thorpe Award? Those guys are knuckleheads. I don't know that they're going to pick the right guy anyway. So we're going to do top position player at each position in college football, in our college football section, which is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very much looking forward to it. But part of the fun is you guys telling us who your picks are, but then also giving your feedback. Why do you pick someone different? Why don't you like our pick? Let's have some fun. We want you guys to be engaged today, having some fun today. And it's gonna be a blast. It's gonna be a blast, and I'm looking forward to it, Trev. And it's gonna be a lot of predictions this week. Obviously we did conferences the last couple days. Today we're doing player predictions. Tomorrow we're doing our bold prediction show, which will be a lot of fun. And then on Friday we're gonna do our Notre Dame season predictions, all 12 games for Notre Dame in segment 1. Segment 2. We will discuss any other potential games that Notre Dame might play in the season, and we do our playoff predictions. So that is going to be a lot of fun. You guys know who some of our playoff picks are going to be. You have a pretty good idea of at least 5, right? I mean, you guys kind of know we're going to have Notre Dame in it, and you guys know who our conference champs are. So I'm looking forward to this week, Trev. And then when we return on Monday, you know what that means.
Game week.
Game week. I'm very excited about that. Very excited about that. So, without further ado, Trevor Trowbridge, I am ready to dive into our conversation about the top players and our predictions for Notre Dame in 2026.
We're going to work our way down the list, Brian, and where we're going to start is the top freshmen on offense. Notre Dame just brought in the number 1 recruiting class in the 26 cycle, according to Rivals on 3. Not their individual rankings, not the composite rankings. But there's a lot of talent in this class. Some options to choose from on both sides of the ball. We're starting on offense. Who's your top freshman on Notre Dame's offense this year?
There was actually a few different potential players here for me. There was a receiver that I considered. There was a running back that I considered. But I am going to stay true. Even though we haven't seen a whole lot of him in fall camp, I'm playing the long game. And I'm going to go with tight end Ian Premer. I think that when it's all said and done, maybe he doesn't have the biggest role in week 1, and he might. We haven't seen a lot of him because we haven't seen much of fall camp. I mean, that's the reality. I don't want to make it seem like he hasn't done anything in fall camp. He just, he looks good in individual drills, and that's all we've seen since the first practice of fall camp. You know what I mean? So I'm playing the long game. I don't know when his time is going to come, but I'm going Ian Premer. I just think I think Cooper Flanagan's going to bring a lot to the offense. And I think he's going to be more of a pass-catching threat maybe than we think. And I think James Flanagan is going to be a heck of a blocker this year. And, Ty Washington's going to have a really important role. I just think there's going to come a point in time, especially with some of the questions in the boundary position, there's going to come a point in time where it's like they got to get 24 involved in the offense. And so I'm going with him. Where the other positions where I thought about Bubba Frazier, I thought about Jonas Walton, I thought about Javian Osborne, I even thought about maybe going with a freshman offensive lineman prediction, but that was going to require predict an injury, and I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's not right. And so I just felt like none of those guys need Like, you know what I mean? It's like they don't need to play those freshmen. I feel like they're going to need to play Ian Premer at some point in time this year. And the fact that he's really talented certainly helps with that.
Yeah, Ian Premer's absolutely in that conversation. He certainly was for me. I did end up going with Bubba Frazier. I think that there's less in front of him to get onto the field compared to a lot of the other freshmen. The wide receiver room is pretty open, whereas in press conferences, a lot of this is what I'm drawing from what the coaches have told us in the media and in interviews when it's, Marcus Freeman was very adamant. It's like, hey, Coop's our guy. Coop's the alpha in the room. Coop's this. And then Mike Denbrock yesterday was like, hey, James Flanagan is our 1B guy. Whereas the wide receiver room, it's very like we have our top four guys. After that, it's kind of up in the air. And he's talked about Matt Jeffrey. He's talked about Bubba Frazier, talking about Mike Denbrock. But I just think that he brings that skill set to the table that's like that gadget type of player. You can get him on some jet sweeps. You can get him on some bubble screens, get him on some tunnel screens. I think they're going to find some interesting ways to get him the football. So a lot of great candidates to go with. Wouldn't shock me if it's Ian Premer. Wouldn't shock me if it's Bubba Frazier. It wouldn't shock me if it's Caden Finley. But I mean, it's just one of those where none of them would really shock me. I would not be beside myself if we're sitting here after their final regular season game on November 28th. It's like, yeah, I mean, Ian Premer's going to be a freshman All-American. Yeah, Bubba Frazier's going to be a freshman All-American. So that's where I went. But there's a lot of picks where you can't go wrong here for sure.
Yeah, when we went over this right before the show, we talked about our picks right before the show. When you said Bubba Frazier, I was like, what? I did have one question for you about your Bubba Frazier pick. Did you at all consider his potential special teams impact into this? So this was just for offense.
Just offense. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good clarification because I thought like what if we were going to include special teams? I'm like, well, Ian may be the more impactful offensive player, but then maybe Bubba wins a return job or something like that. So yeah, just offense. I like that.
Yeah, just
good.
Just offense. In the spirit of newcomers, Brian, let's also talk about the top transfer on offense. Really, we only have two options, and one of them we haven't seen yet. So,
we won't see him for a while. There's really one option. If we didn't agree on this one, I just don't know that we were gonna like this was gonna be a weird show. Like Trevor went with so and so who doesn't even play for Notre Dame. So no, I actually will have that actually is kind of funny. It just popped in my head. I'm going to have a follow-up question to the transfer. So don't move on to the next one yet because I will have a follow-up to the transfer one.
Yeah.
It's Mylan Graham. I mean, that's literally the only option that you have right now. Now, is there a world where Quincy Porter eventually gets healthy and comes in halfway through the year and makes an impact? Sure. But even then, he'd have to make one heck of an impact to pass up Mylan Graham, who I think is going to be a really important part of this receiver rotation from day one. And I think that three-headed monster to the field is going to be a big part of why this offense is going to be so good. Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, and, of course, Mylan Graham. And I'll just give you a little teaser for me. I have all three of them in one of my stat categories that we'll get to after we talk players. But this is an easy choice. But it's also, I would have probably still gone with him even if Quincy Porter was healthy, just because I think Mylan's further along with his game. He's a year older, and he's a guy that's been an effective player. And CJ Carr just likes throwing to Mylan Graham. I mean, that's something that we've seen in the spring and not so much in fall camp because we haven't seen anything in fall camp. But in the spring, that was certainly true. So I think Mylan Graham is certainly going to make an impact. What will his numbers be? It's a good question. It wouldn't shock me if his numbers were somewhat similar to maybe what we saw from Bo Collins a couple years ago. Maybe his catch numbers are, over the course of a 15, 16 game season, maybe his numbers look comparable to Malachi Fields in a, longer. But I'll say this too, if there's more injuries to the field, I think Mylan Graham's your next guy in somewhere. And so I think he's going to have a big role this year.
Yeah, I echo everything that you said about Mylan Graham. There's kind of just one choice as of right now. We could get to the end of the regular season and really the end of the postseason, talk about how Quincy Porter was kind of the difference maker in the postseason once he's back healthy and has practices and experience under his belt. But as of right now, it's Mylan Graham. I'm with you. What was your follow-up question?
Here's my follow-up question. When you look at the Notre Dame players that transferred out this past year, so you look at Kenny Minchie, you look at Jabron Payne, Scrap Richardson, although he'll be playing defense. I'm just trying to think of some of the guys that transferred
Preston
out.
Zinner's now on offense.
Preston Zinner. who is your choice? And if you want to expand it, we can go over the last 2 years. So you include Steve Angeli in this conversation if you like as well. What former Notre Dame player is going to have the most impactful season playing for somebody else on offense?
Yeah, I would probably go with Kenny Minchie here. I like what his potential is and what his ceiling is in the Will Stein offense. I'm curious to see what Steve Angeli is going to do, but coming off of an Achilles injury and a supporting cast just looks vastly different from what it did last year. I'm going with Kenny Minchie, but it'll be close between the two quarterbacks. And then a sleeper, honestly, is probably Preston Zinner at tight end. I think that's fascinating. I'm excited to see what he does this year.
I hope he does well. That kid was a great teammate, did whatever they asked him to do his entire career. I really hope he's able to finish his college career off on a very high note. Very, very, very much hope that. Yeah, I'll re-ask that when we get to the defensive one as well. I have a feeling I know what our answer is going to be for that one, but I think there's a couple good candidates. But let's continue, Mr. Trowbridge.
Who do you have for the top offensive lineman?
So this one was a little tougher for me. This is the first tough one that we had for me. Like me, I went back and forth with a couple guys, but somebody had to convince me why it wasn't going to be Ian Bremer. As far as same thing with with transfer. This is tougher because I think Notre Dame's going to have two really, really good offensive linemen this year in Gerby Lambert and Anthony Knapp. But I'm going with Anthony Knapp because I just think at the end of the day, he's the more experienced offensive lineman. He's the more proven offensive lineman. He's been more consistent so far in his career. I would not be shocked at all if it's Gerby Lambert. But when I look at Anthony Knapp from a leadership standpoint, when I look at what he's going to bring to the run game as a guard, I think he's going to be an elite pass blocker at guard. Because all the issues that hurt him at tackle are gone playing guard, which is playing in space. I think he's going to be a big-time guard. I think this, if of all the things that I've looked at, this and there's one other prediction that I made on offense that I think is going to be the most debatable one throughout the year, and not because Knapp's not a really good player, but just that there's another really good player there with Gerby Lambert. But what separated it for me, Trevor, is just the consistency in the run game that we saw from Anthony Knapp last year and the leadership aspects that I think he brings to the table. I think that's why I have Anthony Knapp as my top lineman. Look, I've said it for 2 years. If they ever move this kid inside, he's going to be a stud. We've been saying it since his freshman year, and I'm excited to see if that pans out that way. So I'm going Anthony Knapp. What say you, Trevor?
Yeah, love the Anthony Knapp pick. There's a lot of guys where you can't really go wrong here, but I did go with Gerby Lambert. I think he has the highest ceiling this year, not over the course of the career, but I think he has the highest ceiling this year of any of the starters in the starting five, with Knapp being extremely, extremely close. I think Gerby Lambert's going to be the best right tackle Notre Dame has had in a very long time. From a level of consistency, dominance, physical traits, athleticism, overall talent, I think he's going to be a certified All-American this year. I went with Gerby Lambert, but don't worry, I will be talking about Anthony Knapp a little bit later. Don't want to give away where, but yeah, I think Gerby Lambert's going to be absolutely outstanding. He's going to be one of the players that gets circled on every scouting report in the postseason of like, hey, I think if they need to play in the run game short yardage, they might be going behind 76. But yeah, it's very close, but not a whole lot of – there's not really a wrong choice that you can go with here. I think there's a case for every single one of them, but I think Knapp and Lambert kind of take the cake as far as the best linemen. Be fun to watch it paying out, that's for sure.
I do agree with your ceiling comment. We're making the picks from completely opposite views, which I think both make sense. I'm going with the known, which I think is ironic that I'm going with the known, the consistent of what we've seen, plus really talented, and you're going with the projection, also really talented. And I think you could agree with my aspect of, I think this is the most known, and I completely agree with your projection pick.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what made this so tough, Trev, because like at first my initial response was Gerby, and then I was like Knapp, and then I was back to Gerby, and I was back to Knapp. This is one where I ended up I actually skipped it because I couldn't. And then I went and finished the rest and then came back and settled on Anthony Knapp. So I like those two picks. If there's a world where it's not one of those two, I'm confident it's because that third guy has a monster season.
Yeah.
My confidence level in these two players being really good this year is quite high.
Yeah.
Quite high.
Yeah. Agreed completely. Like my expectation going into the season for Will Black's like, hey, have a good season, get your feet wet. There's going to be some early redshirt freshman / sophomore mistakes that you're going to make, but we're going to see the flashes, and he's going to become that dude in 27. For Craig, it's stay healthy. For Sullivan, Absher, it's just do your job. But for these two, it's hey, you guys need to go out and be the studs. You need to be those dominant players we believe you can be. I'm with you completely. Let's talk about this one here, Brian. It's the top playmaker, which is a skill player that makes the most big time plays, and it could be big time plays yardage wise or from a clutch or highlight reel standpoint, not necessarily just who has the longest touchdowns every single game. So, who is your top playmaker on offense?
This is my second hardest one to pick behind linemen. And I will be honest, I use special teams as a separator for me. I was very much torn between Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse and Aeneas Williams. And I eventually ruled Aeneas out because I think there's going to be more of a rotation there. And I was really having a tough time between Greathouse and Faison because we've seen both make clutch plays in big moments. We obviously talk a lot about what Greathouse did against Penn State and Ohio State. And he was great. But we often forget, I'll just say it, it's fans, sometimes maybe we forget how clutch Jordan Faison was in the first two games of the college football playoffs. Now, he didn't have necessarily the big numbers that Greathouse had, but he had 7 catches for 89 yards against Indiana. And, had some very clutch plays in that game, was very good against, Georgia, for example, as well. And I look at it, and Greathouse is going to make his clutch plays on the slot fades, and he's led Notre Dame in touchdown receptions in 2 of the 3 years that he's been at Notre Dame, and the only year he didn't was because he only played 4 games. And he wasn't going to lead the team in receptions last year, just the way he was being used through the first 4 games. But so special teams was kind of the final deal breaker. The other aspect of it is I know that CJ Carr knows how to find Jordan Faison. I still don't know how often CJ Carr is going to throw the ball to Jaden Greathouse. I'm hopeful that the things that CJ has said about Jaden Greathouse come to fruition about how clutch he is and how he relies on him, all those type of things. But we watched CJ play 4 games where he threw 4 passes to Jaden Greathouse. So that was kind of that known aspect and special teams, because I do think at least early on, Jordan Faison will be the team's punt returner. I think of just like the clutch third down plays he's going to make on top of the touchdown, some of the big plays. I just think he's going to be a really, really clutch playmaker for Notre Dame this year. And something he developed later last year, he was very inconsistent as a blocker early in the season. And I think later in the year, Jordan became a much more effective blocker, and he was more consistently effective as a blocker than what we saw from Jaden Greathouse in 2024. And that was another factor for me. So I went with Jordan Faison.
Blasphemous. No, that's a good pick. No, that's a great pick, man. I get it completely. I am going with Jaden Greathouse. But I agree with everything that you said about Jordan Faison. This comes down to one that this was the one that I had the most difficulty with, because it's what takes the day. Is it the sample size that we've already seen from Jaden Greathouse being that clutch player, third down against A&M, what he did against Penn State and Ohio State, what he did against Navy to open up the game, what he did against Georgia Tech, what he did against Louisville. In the 4 catches he had, one of them last year, 2 of them last year were big time. Contested catch against Texas A&M, contested catch against Arkansas on the road. So does that take the day, or is it more so CJ Carr needs to continue building out his chemistry with him? We're having fun today. I went with the positive. I think CJ Carr and Jaden Greathouse are going to form a great connection. And I'm leaning more into, hey, Mike Denbrock knows who the go-to guy is in those crunch time clutch situations. So that's what I'm leaning towards. I'm going Jaden Greathouse. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest if it's Jordan Faison either.
Likewise. Like I said, this was my second toughest one to predict.
Yeah.
Let's go breakout player, Trev. So we've done top freshman, top transfer, top lineman, top playmaker. Let's go breakout player. And for breakout player, we're going with more of the traditional breakout player. We're not doing the offseason breakout of the 3 levels. We're kind of going with a more traditional breakout, a guy who maybe hasn't been a dominant player or hasn't done a whole lot that becomes a far more productive player, whether it be a A guy that had one career catch that jumps into 40, but not a guy that had zero catches and jumps into 15. You know what I mean? Like, that's a breakout to a degree. Or somebody who maybe played and was a solid player like TJ Jones his senior year. I mean, he was a 3-year starter, but man, he broke out as a senior with 1,000 yards. It's more of the higher level breakout. So let's talk breakout player, Trev. Who was your breakout player on offense?
Thought long and hard about this one, and I was between either a running back or a tight end. In full transparency, and you know me, I erred on the side of tight end. But in all seriousness,
No
I went with.
way.
I know. Breaking news, everyone. I'm high on who Notre Dame has a tight end this year, but I'm going with Cooper Flanagan. They've put together as a program just a track record of whoever steps up into that number one tight end role is just going to produce. Whether they did nothing the previous year, whether they were only utilized as a blocker in the previous year, or they were in high school the year before, somebody somebody at Notre Dame as the number one tight end just always steps up. I was concerned about what was going to happen in 2013 with the departure of Tyler Eifert. Troy Nicholas had a very promising season. I mean, it goes back to when Anthony Fasano left and John Carlson steps up, and then John Carlson leaves, and then Kyle Rudolph takes over, and then so the lineage goes on and on. The other piece of this too is some of the questions that we do have in the boundary. I think CJ Carr is going to need a security blanket. Very high on what he's going to do this season. He's a preseason Heisman favorite on FanDuel for a reason. But I think one of his security blankets could come out of the tight end room. And I think Cooper Flanagan, he only has 5 career catches. 3 of them have gone for touchdowns. I could see him being a big red zone threat this year. And I could also see him being like an old reliable in the seams or vertically or on third down as well. So I'm going with Cooper Flanagan, but it was very hard for me to move away from the running back room after losing Love and Price.
Yeah, he was on my board. And honestly, what it came down to for me is just we've just seen greater production from the running back room. And of course, I mean, a guy that rushes for 900 yards is more than a guy that catches for 700 yards, but a 700-yard season for a tight end is significantly better than a 900-yard season for running back. So I'm not just going raw data, but like we've seen 1,000-yard rushers just kind of step into the mix. You think of we've talked about the long lineage of this happening. We've talked about how, CJ Procise, then you go right from him to Josh Adams, you go right from him to Dexter Williams, you go right from him to Tony Jones, you go right from him to Kyron Williams, right from him to Logan Diggs and Audrey Estime, right from them to go to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So it's just kind of been that lineage. What my battle was more of, which running back do I go with?
Sure.
That was really my question mark, because I thought long and hard about going with Kedron Young here, but again, I'm going with a little bit more of the known, and I'm also going with a little bit more of the all around ability that Kedron Young, or that Aeneas Williams is going to bring to the table this year. So I'm going Aeneas Williams as my breakout player. I just think he's at the very least, worst case scenario, barring injury, he's 1B. Let's assume that Kedron's just the best runner, and he becomes what Audric Estime was in 2022. At the very least, as a runner, Aeneas is going to be Logan Diggs. But he brings a lot more of that pass-catching ability to the table, where there's a world in which I could see Kedron Young leading the team in rushing yards, but Aeneas Williams leading the team in all-purpose yards, or like total offense, rushing and receiving. I could see that happening, and I believe that's exactly what happened in 2022. If I remember correctly, Trev, and I'm going to look that up because I maybe I'm incorrect on that, but if I remember correctly, I believe that Logan actually had more total offense in like all-purpose yards in 2022. I'm actually going to look that up right now. But yeah, let's see here. Total yards, 2022. No, Audric had 51 more yards, so I just thought that the receiving. I didn't actually know. Yeah. Even 29 kick return yards. So Audric had 98 more rushing yards. Logan only had 76 more receiving yards. So Audric was slightly ahead of Logan, but I would see a greater disparity between receiving yards, in my opinion, between Kedron and Aeneas than what we saw from Logan and Audric. I didn't realize Audric had over 100 yards receiving that year.
I didn't
only
either.
remember the one seam route is the only one that
Yeah.
I remember him catching that year. But he had over 100 yards.
Well, to your point about Logan, I mean, I'm remembering the like little slide route that he caught against South Carolina and housed it, and the wheel route against North Carolina, and like the big
Yeah.
chunk plays that, I would have
But
thought the same
maybe that's
thing.
all he did. Just remember him doing more in the pass game because that's like
Sure.
110 yards right there. You
I
know
mean,
what I mean?
honestly,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I could see something like that. I think that's going to be what this backfield looks like more than maybe what we saw last 2 years, where you had two studs, but there was clearly one stud ahead of the other stud. There was a
Sure.
significant, you know what I mean, like 1,000 yards and 600 yards, as opposed to where this year it could be like 900 and 800, kind of like what we saw in 2022. But so I went with Aeneas, but I thought long and hard about Kedron, and I like the Cooper Flanagan pick. He didn't really he wasn't that guy for me because of my freshman pick. That's the other
Sure.
part of it too, Trev. Is like if Ian Premer's going to be my top freshman, that's catches coming away from Cooper, and Cooper's going to have a big impact in the run game. But we've seen him do that before. And I don't know that that jumps him into like national prominence where if Aeneas or Kedron goes out and rushes for 1,000 yards, all of a sudden they're getting talked about a lot more.
Sure. Oh, that's totally fair. Get that completely. Brian, let's talk about comeback player.
I did want to say one real quick. I did want to add something into this real quick. There was a prediction up here that I want to bring up from John Banco. He said Cam Williams. I can't go with Cam because we haven't seen him. But if you were to say, Brian, if you could pick any breakout that you would be able to will into existence, what would it be?
Yeah.
So I could pick a breakout and say, by me saying this, it's going to happen. It'd probably be Cam Williams for the reasons we've talked about over and over and over again. Unfortunately, because we didn't see much in fall camp, we haven't seen Cam do anything. Marcus Freeman has been asked, and Mike Denbrock's been asked. All these guys get asked about the receivers, and they mention almost everyone but Cam Williams. And as I told Vince yesterday, it's because either A, Cam hasn't done anything, or B, they don't want to mention him because they don't want to jinx it, and they don't want to give it away. I don't think that's it, but I'm hopeful that that's it. That it's like it's the secret weapon kind of thing. I haven't seen it, and it is what it is. But if I could wish anybody into existence, it would be Cam Williams. So I did like that pick, but I've got to see it from Cam. Yep. I've seen Aeneas ball out. I've even seen Kedron ball out. We've seen Cooper Flanagan do some things. I need to see it from Cam before I can go there. But man, I hope that John is right on. I would love it if he was right on that one.
You and me both. Let's talk about breakout player. And before we give away who that is, quick kind of backstory to what this is. Comeback player has a twofold impact. One is the easy one of coming back from injury, like we didn't see him and now they're back and healthy again. The other one is kind of coming back from a narrative, like they just didn't have a good season. But like, for example, how some people view Drake. They view Drake Bowen as a player who just didn't have a good 2025 because his start to 2025 was bad. So that's the other piece of comeback that we're talking about here. So with that in mind, Brian, who's your comeback player of the year on offense?
It's going to be Jaden Greathouse. And a big part of that is because he's healthy. I do think he's going to have a really good season. How good? A lot of that's going to depend on what his relationship is like with CJ Carr. And guys, I'm sorry to say this, but like, we just don't know. Nobody knows. We know what CJ Carr has said. We know what Jaden Greathouse has said, but we have seen one practice. And outside of RVA, we didn't see Jaden Greathouse get thrown the ball to a whole lot in that practice that we saw. So I have no idea. So that was kind of the holdup. But at the end of the day, I still think he looks great. He's been healthy, and that position inherently is going to make throws. So, and this is a guy that caught 4 passes last year. If he comes out and catches 30 to 35 passes, which wouldn't even be what he did 2 years ago, that's quite a comeback from a guy that missed the final 8 games of the season and missed all spring with an injury. So I'm hopeful that there's a world in which Jaden Greathouse is their best receiver this year. But I just need to see that relationship with CJ and Jaden with my own eyes before I'm ready to maybe jump fully into it in this prediction. Maybe when we get to some stat conversations, I'll have some different thoughts. But in these, I kind of went with a little bit more of the knowns.
That's totally fair. I get that completely. For my comeback player, I went with Ashton Craig. I believe that wherever he is, and I'm not getting into the conversation of is he center, is he going to be at guard, just what I know is the ceiling of the offensive line is higher when number 70 is in the starting lineup. Some of this, too, as far as comeback player goes, is I'm kind of willing this into being the first regular season that Ashton Craig finishes, because there is a statistical difference when he is in the starting lineup versus when he's not. I think they're a more complete pass protecting unit when he's in there, and I think they're a very, very complete run blocking unit when he's in there as well. If Ashton Craig is able to remain healthy for 12 games, and then obviously you knock out game 14, 13, 14, 15, potentially 16, we'll dive more into that on Friday. I think this offensive line is Joe Moore Award caliber. Can they win it without Ashton Craig in the starting lineup? Absolutely,
Sure.
because that's the amount of depth of talent. But does that road
And
become easier
we've
with him in
seen
there?
Joe Otting play quality football
Yes.
last year, and he's only going to keep getting better, 100%.
Yes.
But boy, like you said, though, he raises that bar, man.
He does. Yeah, that's Ashton Craig is that guy for me, man. He's an exceptional player. Let's talk about the most.
Hold on. I got this one. Somebody just said this. It goes back to what I said about the breakout player. I'm going to go with something here. Andy M. Moore. If I could will a player into being back to be in the comeback category, this is my one right here. Andy M. Moore. If I could will someone, it would be Charles Jagusah. I mean, what a comeback that would be. In the last 2 years, he's played in 2 games. That would be quite a comeback. But Trev and I are in the same category. I believe it when I see it. He hasn't practiced yet with the team. Guys had minimum 5 surgeries that we know of on the arm. I pray that he's able to play football again, literally, because of his situation, and I would love to see it. But until we actually see him put the pads on and show that he can actually still play football and that right arm can actually be functional the way that it was, I can't go there. I mean, I don't even know how much lifting he's done because of the severity of that arm in the last year. I really don't know. But man, if I could, speak it into existence, NDM Moore, bro, I'm right there with you. It would be Charles Jagusah.
Yeah. No disagreements on my side. I'm with you.
Yep. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick because some of these are kind of like that fun, like, boy, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
100%. Brian, let's talk about the most outstanding player. Now, quick backstory for this one. We're talking about the most dominant. They have the biggest impact, combination of production, big game performance. It's not necessarily, there's a difference between most outstanding and then the MVP. MVP is the most valuable. It's kind of like the most indispensable. Most outstanding is the most dominant, big game performance, things like that. So, Brian, who's your guy?
They can be the same, but they don't have to be the same.
Yep.
On offense, let's just do these together, Trev. On offense, we have the most outstanding and the MVP as the same guy. Most outstanding is, like Trev said, most dominant, most impactful, just best all-around player. And for me, that's CJ Carr. I think, somebody the other day, they were in a response to one of our shows said, hey, I don't know that Notre Dame has like that star player on offense this year without Jeremiah Love. And I'm like, yeah, they do. It's called CJ Carr. That's who it is. It's CJ Carr. So he's their most outstanding player. I think he's going to be the elevator of this team. I think he's going to, raise everybody else around him, bring everybody else around him along with him, and he's just going to be their most outstanding player. But I also think he's their most valuable in that he's the most irreplaceable when you look at the depth chart, but also as the quarterback in an offense that I think they're going to ask a lot of the quarterback. If other guys are playing better, it's going to be in part because of him. That's what a great quarterback does. He makes others better. Whereas if Jaden Greathouse is balling out, he makes the quarterback better and he maybe impacts the receivers a little bit better. But does he impact the run game? Sure, but not to the degree that CJ Carr would as someone who's throwing the ball, getting out of checks, getting into the right looks and things like that, right? Like a great offensive lineman impacts the quarterback, but a great offensive lineman doesn't make receivers run their routes better, that kind of thing. And so I just think a great quarterback is just someone who just that's why quarterbacks win the MVP so often. Like, yeah, that guy may not be the best player in the league, but he's not the most valuable player in the league. And I think CJ Carr this year will be both. And then when you consider the fact that the depth chart is most questionable, I would argue the most questionable aspect of the depth chart of the entire team is at quarterback. Not because there's not talent, but because it's incredibly young. And there's literally the backup quarterbacks on Notre Dame's roster as of today have played as many snaps of college football in a Notre Dame uniform as you and I have. 0. Now, I hope that changes in, what would it be, like 11 or 11 days, right? Isn't it 11 days? I hope that changes in 11 days because, that would mean that Notre Dame has a convincing win and they're able to get into the field. But that's kind of why I had to go with CJ Carr here for both.
I think that's fair.
What about you?
CJ Carr is my most outstanding player, highlighted specifically for big game performances. I'll just be so real with you guys around how I'm going to evaluate his season. I don't care what he does against Rice. I don't. He's going to put up numbers. I don't care what he does on the road against North Carolina. I don't care what he does against Stanford. I've already seen what he's done to Purdue. I'm evaluating CJ Carr on 3 games in the regular season: October 17th, November 7th, and SMU on November 21st. To a degree, the season opener to help set the tone because the offense is going to run through him this year. But there's nothing that he's going to show me against some of those teams that I mentioned that I haven't already seen from him. It's the big game performance piece. Last year, that was 4-24. Kind of like that thing from the 2006 UCLA game that we were talking about, like, hey, when you need a play to happen, who do you look at in the huddle? Last year, it was Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price if one of those two were in. This year, it's going to be 13. I think he's going to be the most outstanding player this year because there's going to be some situations that dictates that he has to. I agree with everything that you said about the value piece, but I did go a different direction here, and I went with Anthony Knapp as my most valuable player on offense this year for Notre Dame. I think his impact is twofold. One, his move inside the left guard is giving Will Black what Anthony Knapp never had when he started as a true freshman. And with Ashton Craig coming back from injury, I think that puts a little bit less stress on Ashton Craig if they started an inexperienced left guard. Not only is Ashton Craig having to come back and be that guy that I think that Brian thinks that he can be, he's also having to coach up the left guard alongside him. Now Anthony Knapp is their most experienced offensive lineman. And so he has that impact as far as value goes. The other piece to me is I agree with everything that you said about CJ. But he can't take advantage of his full weapons if he's running for his life half the time. We won't get to see that. And I think Anthony Knapp helping shore up the left side of the offensive line is going to be such a big piece of that. So that's why I think he's the most valuable. Talking about depth, the depth on the offensive line as a whole, I have a lot of confidence in. But there's a world, especially with some injuries that have happened in fall camp and Matty Augustine going down and some questions on the depth along the interior at certain spots. I also don't know who they'd be starting at left guard that would be able to replace Anthony Knapp to that degree. No debate whatsoever with you about having CJ Carr in there, but for me, I went with Anthony Knapp as MVP.
Love that. I love that outside the box thinking, and I love the fact that you're putting the aspect of making people around him better. That to me is what an MVP is supposed to be about. Like, that's why one of the biggest MVP beefs I ever had, I think it was when he was with the Rangers. I think there was a year where Alex Rodriguez won MVP, and he was with the Rangers, and I think they finished like last. I'm gonna look that up. What year was it? So that would have been 2000. I think it was 2003, and they basically gave Alex Rodriguez the MVP, and I was like, but they sucked. You know what I mean? It's like,
sure.
Yeah, he was maybe the most outstanding, but like, dude, they were terrible. So if you took him off that team, they still suck. They would just suck even more. Like I never like value is like it's there's a difference between most outstanding and most valuable. And I think to be the most valuable, you've got to make people around you better, and you've got to be an elevator of what's around you. And how can you do that when you're 25 games out of first place, which I'm looking at what they were in 03
right.
when he won the MVP? You know what I mean? It's just like, like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we going with that guy as the MVP when his team sucks, And so I think that's such an important piece to being an MVP, such an important piece to being an MVP. And I'm right there with you. Right there with you on that one. Now, obviously, that's why I have CJ, but I love the fact that your pick is not just because someone who's a really good player, my top offensive lineman. And I also want to give some context here to Trevor's comment. I asked you before the show, did you pick him here because you didn't want to pick somebody twice? And he said no, because I was like, look, in this instance, we can have multiple people. He said no. So this wasn't, well, I've already used CJ and I've already used Gerby, so let's go with Knapp. Like, this is the actual pick with everybody on the table, so I thought that was really well done as well. I like that. Sir. Let's jump into some of our stat conversations here, Trevor. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to pick like top rusher, top pass catcher this year in a game and then over the course of the season. So let's go first here, Trevor. What player will have the most rushing yards in a single game for Notre Dame in 2026? It can be a running back, but as we've seen in other years, sometimes it's a quarterback. Yeah. So who will be that guy for Notre Dame in 2026? Top single game rusher for the Irish.
Boy, as much as I would love for that pick to be CJ Carr and just add a little bit of dual threat dimension to his game.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if there's this like $180 game that CJ has against somebody? Yeah, it'd be great.
It would either be he has an ungodly rushing performance or the running back room and O-line played really bad. There's no in between.
It's like that defense just never respected CJ. He had 3 read zones that he just pulled, and there was nobody backside. He had 167 yards on 7 carries, because he just ripped off like 350 yarders because they just didn't respect it. Yeah, that'd be hilarious.
Right. In all seriousness, the play. No, you're good. In all seriousness, my pick for this one's Kedron Young. I think there's going to be a couple games this season, actually, where he kind of runs away with it because I think they're going to come across a couple defenses that just want nothing to do with him. 5'11", 235, 240-pound back. Reminds me a little bit, back in 05 and 06, when Notre Dame would play Michigan State, they had a running back. I think his name was J.U. Culprit or something. And Notre Dame's defense wanted quite literally nothing to do with him. Nothing in the slightest. And I see a couple of defenses face Notre Dame's offense this year that just have no answers for him. I think he's going to have a couple of games this year with a couple of touchdowns, and he's well over 130, 140 yards.
I dig it. I love it. That was my pick as well. I just think there's going to be a game where he just eats. I think that if I had to predict today, I'd say Aeneas Williams is the starting running back, and Kedron's going to be the number 2 running back that's going to play a ton. As I've said, kind of a 1A, 1B type of thing. But part of that is you go with the hot hand. And there's just going to be that game where I just think, like you said, Kedron is just, okay, he's going off. And you work him. You give him 20-plus carries in that particular game. And so that's why I have him. Now, what about for the season? Who is going to be Notre Dame's leading rusher in yards for the entire season? Trevor Trowbridge. Trevor Trowbridge is not going to lead the Irish in rushing. I want to know what Trevor Trowbridge thinks about.
Well, that was my pick, so we can just move on to yours. I'm about to go off this year, dude. Believe that. No, this one I am going with Aeneas Williams. I think one of the things working in his favor is he is RB1 heading into the season. While I think that Kedron is going to have, arguably, if I had to put a number on it, rough estimate, I would say 3 of the 12 most impressive rushing performances of the season. I think Aeneas being the number 1 guy, first one out on the field, because there's going to be games where Aeneas racks up 80, 90, close to 100 yards in a game where Kedron has like 40, and then I think there's going to be other games where when Kedron has his 130, 140 yard performance, I still think Aeneas is going to get 40 to 50 yards because we've seen that play out. So I think over the course of the season, it's going to be Aeneas, not by a ton, but I still have him as Notre Dame's leading rusher over the course of the season.
Same. I think he's going to be the most consistent. You could argue that maybe 2 of the 3 or 4 most impressive performances might be Kedron, and Aeneas is just going to keep churning out yards, just steadily turning out yards. So, barring injury, I'm going with Aeneas Williams for the season as well. Would it shock me if it's Kedron? Not at all. Wouldn't shock me if it's Nolan James. But I'm just going with kind of the known commodity here. I'm going to go with Aeneas Williams. Sure. Let's get into the pass game, Trev. So we're going to do catches and then yards. So let's first start off with what Notre Dame player will have the game where he catches the most passes in a single game this season?
I'm going with Jordan Faison. He is kind of CJ Carr's old reliable, and I'll go as far to say I think it happens early. I think it's going to be sometime before they get to BYU on the road that Jordan Faison early on to get this Notre Dame offense jump started. That's going to be CJ's go-to guy. Wouldn't shock me if on the road against North Carolina, at home at night against Michigan State, Jordan Faison has 4 first half catches. And then he just continues to stack onto that. So early on, I'm going Jordan Faison before the entire, I guess you call it the entire force of the depth of the Notre Dame wide receiver room gets unleashed. So I'm going with Faison.
I went Jaden Greathouse. I think over the course of the season, maybe, we'll have to see what that relationship will be, but I just think there's going to be some game where they're going to throw him 3-4 screens. He's going to catch some quick third downs, and he's just going to make some crazy grabs, and he'll get targeted like 10 times and catch 9 of them. I just think that'll be the case. It wouldn't shock me if it's early in the year, like you said, because there may be a game where maybe Mike Denbrock's let's force feed Jaden Greathouse, but I think it comes later in the year. Mike Denbrock's never, I shouldn't say never. We haven't seen him be someone who often force feeds someone into the lineup, even when I think he should. So that's why I think it'll maybe be a little bit later in the year once Jaden Greathouse establishes himself. I could see a world where like maybe Jordan Faison leads the team in receiving yards over the course of the year. But if you look at like the last 6 games, it's Jaden. Because remember, that's how it was in 2018, where Miles Boykin was the team's leading pass catcher. But if you kind of look down the stretch, you started to see Ian Book go to Chase Claypool more and more and more that season later in the year. I could see something like that happening. But I'm going to go with Jaden Greathouse as the one individual performance where he catches the most passes. What about the season, Trevor? Who leads Notre Dame in receptions in 2026?
This one I am going with Jaden Greathouse for the big games. For BYU, for Miami, for SMU, and then obviously in the postseason. He has put together, I believe, the biggest sample size, all-encompassing of what wide receivers should do in big games. And it's not just for the playoff games. It's what you've talked about so much on the show. On the road against Texas A&M, home against Louisville, in an NFL stadium against Navy, in an NFL stadium against Georgia Tech, and then obviously what he did in the Orange Bowl in the national title game. I think over the course of the season, with all the big games they play in the regular season, the top 3, then who they're going to face in the postseason, I have Greathouse in that one.
So we had it flipped. You have Greathouse in games, and you have Faison in games, Greathouse over the course of the season, right?
Yep.
I have Greathouse in the best individual game. I have Faison leading the team in receptions. And I think it's going to be very close. And I think that it's going to be this is what I mean. It's like, as long as he stays healthy, I think it's what I kind of said earlier, is I could see a world where if you look at the last 7 or 8 games of the year, Greathouse actually had more catches, but Faison's that guy early in the year. And then there's just that level of consistency that we see from Greathouse, because the nature of that position is you're going to catch a lot of passes. It's a check down position at times. It's a position where they like to open up underneath routes for early down, sort of let's get good 6 or 7 yards on an early down. It's just a position that tends to be more heavily targeted in the Mike Denbrock offense from a volume standpoint. And I also think that we'll see a bit more of a rotation in the slot because they want to keep Jaden Greathouse healthy over the course of the season. There may be times where Greathouse doesn't play quite as much because they're trying to keep him healthy, where Faison will be that guy. So I think those are the reasons why I went with Jordan Faison over the course of the entire season. Now,
that makes sense.
So I love that we had the same 2 guys, 1 on 1 and 1, but it was reversed. Let's get into yards, Trevor. What player will have the highest yards in a game for receiving yards in a game for Notre Dame this season? Who you got?
Mylan Graham. I think there's going to be a game where Mylan Graham kind of goes off a little bit. He provides that over-the-top skill set that's not – Jaden Greathouse provides over-the-top skill set, but it's kind of like up to the catch point is how he's been utilized.
Yeah,
he has ability after the catch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas Mylan Graham he reminds me of that player that can kind of get behind the defense a little bit, catch it in stride, and take it to the house. I could see Mylan Graham finishing a game with 130 receiving yards and have no more than 4 or 5 catches. I could see it being something to that degree. So in a singular game this season, I'm going with Mylan Graham.
I love it. I'm going Jordan Faison. for similar reasons. We've
Ooh.
seen Jordan Faison be able to kind of get over the top of a defense at times in certain looks. We saw it even more last year. I think we're also this is maybe as much wishful thinking as it is an actual prediction based on what we know. So just full transparency. I also think it's a situation where I'm hoping that we're going to see more on the run stuff this year and not as much stationary work for Jordan Faison. I think just having him spend most of his time catching hitches and outs and stop routes, which is a deeper hitch, in some degrees doesn't use his skill set enough. I want to see him running crossers. I want to see him running overs. I want to see him running digs and unders and things like that, where you're letting him catch the ball on the run, where you're letting him get the ball in space, not catch a hitch route, square the guy up, and have to then do a bunch of work, where he can kind of do that while on the run. That's also my hope. But it comes down to consistency from him. I mean, look, Faison led the team in receiving yards last year. Greathouse led the team in receiving yards the year before that. I just feel like if Faison is healthy, and Greathouse is healthy, Faison's going to play more, and he's going to have some different things. But I also think if they use him the way that I hope that they use him, there will be a game where he has like 2 big plays. You know, a double move that he catches a touchdown for 50, and then a couple crossers that go for like 30 each. And next thing you know, Faison's got 5 catches for $160 in that particular game. And that's how I see it. So, like, I'll have a comment about your Mylan Graham pick here in a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to stick with Faison as my guy for most receiving yards in a game. Now, Trev, let's go with most receiving yards over the course of the season.
This one, I'm going back to Jaden Greathouse for his impact in those big moments. I won't harp too much on it because I've already talked about it, but I think that's when you're going to see his true light come to shine. I don't know if we're going to see Jaden Greathouse against Rice have 80 receiving yards, but I can guarantee you in big road games, in the postseason, then on those 3 dates that we talked about, I think Jaden Greathouse has the most yards.
So I said earlier that I thought the reception numbers, it was going to be Faison, but I thought it was going to be close. I think the way this year is going to play out, I expect Faison to have more catches, but I think Greathouse will have about 1 yard to 1.5 yards higher yards per catch average. And if the catch numbers are close, that puts Greathouse on top yards-wise. So I'm going Jaden Greathouse.
Love it.
I think there's going to be 3 guys that really separate from everybody else in targets, and they play 2 positions. I'm hoping Micah Gilbert kind of forces his way into this conversation, but we've seen from Mike Denbrock in his career in recent years at Notre Dame, and then also 3 years ago at LSU, those field spots get a lot of targets. And so I think you're going to see those guys be effective, and I think Faison will be the leader for most of the year. But as I said, last 5-6 games, I see Greathouse kind of taking that role.
I like it. Yeah, I like it a lot. Let's talk big plays here, Brian. Who do you think on offense is going to have the longest individual play of the season?
So this leads into your prediction about Mylan Graham having the most yards. And so I kind of smirked when you said that, because I could see it happening, because I have Mylan Graham as having the biggest play of the year for the exact reasons that you explained. There's going to be that game where he just kind of gets that over route, that post route, that, after the catch play at their own 15, and he just houses it. Somebody in the chat said Bubba Frazier. I could definitely see that one, but how much will Bubba play? How many of those opportunities will he have? I don't know. I know that he can make those after the catch plays. We've actually seen it in a highlight that Notre Dame put out. But I like Mylan to be that guy that makes that play. I just, whether it's a wheel route, whether it's a post route over the top, whether it's a seam route where they don't defend him, whether it's a crosser, an over, or something where he catches the ball on the run and just kind of gets up that sideline, I think Mylan Graham is going to be that guy. As far as having the biggest play. So so that's kind of where I liked your most yards, but I don't know that he'll have like 4 more that gets him to like a $160, that kind of thing. That was why I didn't go with them on the game. But I was like, Trev's prediction could make a lot of sense because I have Mylan Graham as being that guy that has that. And this is the first time I'm going to have to go back and look. When was the last time Notre Dame's longest play in a season was a pass play, not a run play? Because it definitely wasn't the last 2 years, thanks to Jeremiah Love, because their longest play last year was 94. Longest play the year before that was 98. I'd be curious when the last time the only time I know of, like off the top of my head that I'm confident of, is 2010. When you had the 95 yarder from Dane Chris to Kyle Rudolph. But I'm very curious when the last time that happened. Because, I'm thinking, somebody said 2023. That's kind of my guess because but I'm not sure, you had Tyree, Tobias, and Audric all had 70-something yard plays that year.
Yeah, Tobias had one against Central Michigan.
So did Tyree.
Yeah.
They both did that game. And then Audric had a 70-something yarder against
NC State. Okay. That is interesting.
Yep. So, but I'm going with that this year. I
like it.
That's where I'm going.
I am sticking with a run play being the longest play, but I'm going with Jonas Walton. I think that he has big playability. I do not think it's going to be in a crazy, meaningful minute. I see it being like, if you guys remember Chris Tyree's 94-yard touchdown run against Syracuse. I think it's going to be something like that.
I love it.
I think it's going to be something like that. So I'm going Jonas Walton. I think that there's going to be early on in the season, he's going to get his opportunity. I mean, Jaywan Sider said it himself. He's like, he's going to play this year. I don't know when, I don't know where, but he's going to play. And I think there's going to be a play where Jonas Walton, once the defense sees taillights, they're not catching him. So I have it being one of the freshman running backs to where it kind of opens our eyes, be like, okay, Love and Price are gone. Who knows how long Aeneas and Kedron are sticking around, but regardless, the future of this room is bright. So I have that one. I have Walton with the longest play of the season.
I love that you pulled that. I love that you pulled that from 2020 because I was literally looking that play up. It was a 94-yard touchdown run in 2020 against Syracuse. I love that. I could see him or Javian Osborne doing that. Yep. Absolutely could see that. I'm sticking with Mylan though. He's going to have one for over 80.
I love it.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. So we're going to see how this plays out. I'm looking at some other times where that happened, Trev. In 2014, Notre Dame's longest play from scrimmage was a pass play. Somebody in the chat said, what about Will Fuller? Wasn't Will Fuller, though. It was C.J. Prosise, who had a 78. Yep. He had a 78-yard touchdown as a rusher, as a pass catcher in 2014. So he was another big play guy. In 2015, Will Fuller's. I'm looking up what Will Fuller's longest touchdown was, but he didn't in 2015 either. Will Fuller's longest play in 2015 was an 81-yard touchdown run. They had that year, C.J. Prosise had a 91-yard touchdown run against Georgia Tech, and that wasn't the team's longest play that year. Josh Adams against Wake Forest went for 98 yards. Yep. So it's even with the biggest play guy that Notre Dame's had on offense in the last decade, 15, 20 years since maybe Golden Tate, you still had somebody else that had that big play. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes this year. See how it goes. That was a lot of big plays. I really hope that we can get back to seeing some of that stuff this year, Trev. That would be a lot of fun. That would be a whole lot of fun. But yeah, I think this team is good. This is something that I was debating with somebody the other day. There's a lot of talk about how, well, this team won't be as big of a, as much of a big play team as they were back and I don't agree. Somebody's like, oh, they're going to be a methodical. It was a Miami fan, and I didn't even debate him. Actually, he was debating somebody else, and I just like, I'm not even freaking going here. But this notion that like this team is going to be this like ground and pound, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, because I refuse to say 3 yards in a cloud of dust because it's the dumbest thing ever, because 3 yards in a cloud of dust gets you to 4th and 1. I've never understood that expression. Although this era, it's the most applicable because teams go for it on fourth down so much more than they used to. But that's kind of where I'm going to go there on that one, Trev. I think this team is going to be a lot more big play than maybe some people think. And I was trying to remember what game that Will Fuller had an 81-yard touchdown. I remember he had a 75 against USC, 73 against Stanford. I couldn't remember when he had the 81-yarder. It was in the Fiesta Bowl.
How long? Oh, okay.
Remember the catch and run where the corner fell down and he ran for 81? Yeah, I couldn't remember what game that was, 81. I literally had to look it up. And I'm like, because I remember the go route against Stanford, which is the craziest thing. I've ever told you the story. So when I was at the game, the Stanford game in 2015, and when Deshaun Kaiser threw that go route against Terrence Alexander for a touchdown, when the ball left his hand, Terrence Alexander was 2 yards in front of Will Fuller. Will Fuller hadn't caught him yet. Deshaun Kaiser was like, he will. He just launches it down the field. And as the ball's in the air, this is Terrence Alexander, this is Will Fuller. This happens while the ball's in the air, and Will Fuller, bam, touchdown. I was like, dang, that's a disheartening feeling because Terrence Alexander knew what was coming, and he was just, he was trying, brother, and he just launched, and then just this happens, like, bam, touchdown. But yeah, I remember the 75-yarder. That was the post route over the top against Adoree Jackson. I could not remember what the 81-yarder was, and it was.
I thought for some reason it was in the season opener against Texas when Malik hit him on his second touchdown. His first touchdown was a backside dig.
Yeah.
But
that was 66.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a 66-yarder against Texas, a 59-yarder against UVA, 46-yarder against Georgia Tech, 75-yarder against USC, 47-yarder against Pitt, 73-yarder against Stanford, and an 81-yarder against Ohio State. He was a pretty decent big play weapon that year.
Yeah, that ain't bad.
Pretty solid. Pretty solid.
In the spirit of big plays, we have one more superlative to kind of cover. Who do you think at the end of the year on Notre Dame's offense over the course of the season has the most plays of 30 yards or more?
Going to Aeneas Williams. I could see it being a receiver just because of the rotation, if there is a deeper rotation at running back. But I actually think Aeneas is going to have 3 or 4 plays like that in the pass game as well. And I think that's what separates him. I think he'll be that guy that has the most 30-yard gains in the course of a season. I thought about him. I thought about Jaden Greathouse. I thought about Keidron Young. I thought about Jordan Faison. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Aeneas Williams. Just opportunity. Running backs carry the ball more. I think this offensive line is going to be still very good. And I think he's also going to add some of that value in the pass game.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going back to Mylan Graham with this one for what his ability is over the top. I think it'll be close. I think there's going to be a bunch of players in contention for it, to your point, but I ended up landing on Mylan Graham. If I'm wrong, it'll be one of Aeneas Williams, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison. Yeah, I'm with you.
So to your point, do you think – so am I reading you correctly that you think that the targets over the course of the entire season between Faison, Graham, and Greathouse is going to be pretty spread out amongst the 3?
Yeah, pretty evenly distributed type of deal.
Okay. By the way, Trev, real quick, Irish Indy 97, he is correct. Audrix went for 80 in 2023.
Against NC State?
NC State, it went for 80. I thought it was 70, but it went for 80. It was the one where they come out of the break. I think it was like the first play out of the storm break, and it houses it. I was there as well. So, yes, it was even that year, it was also a run. And this is the whole point about, they don't have backs with big-time speed. Guys, I promise you that there's not a running back on the roster that's slower than Audric Estime. I promise you that. I say this all. Running back speed is not as important as receiver speed when it comes to making big plays. It just isn't. So they'll have plenty of big plays this year. And if they don't, it's more of an offensive line problem than it is a running back problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good. Good stuff.
Brian, let's dive into our defensive player predictions here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We just wrapped up the offensive side of the ball. Great conversation. A lot of the same categories as far as superlatives go, but now it's time to look at the defense.
Did you find this side of the ball to be a little bit tougher than offense, or was it easy? Because for me, it was actually, some of these were no-brainers, but some of these were a little bit tougher for me than offense. There was a couple on
Yeah,
offense that were really hard, but a lot of the ones on offense to me were kind of easy. Not the stat ones, but more so like the freshman, transfer, lineman, all that type of stuff.
yeah, it definitely depended on the category or the superlative that we were talking about, but it was more difficult on defense for me, all encompassing, because I think that there's more players that fit the category on defense than so the offense. Like I'm very high on this offense, but they have a lot more to show me over the course of the season. So if I'm talking about top pass catcher in a game, like it really comes down to three, four guys, maybe. Whereas if we're talking about the top tackler on defense, I mean, you could have five guys from the linebacker room alone that you could choose from. And so I think that's one of the things that's tough about that one. But I had all encompassing a little bit more difficulty with the defensive side of the ball than the offense.
Agree. Just so many more good options. I mean, that's really what it came down to for
Honestly.
me. Is there's so many good options at a lot of these positions. So, yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into it, Trev. We'll start off like we did last time. This first part will be the same order. We'll start off with who is the top freshman, and when we are using the new NCAA standards of there is no red shirt insert. It's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, fifth year. So this is first year players only. Who is Trevor Trowbridge's top freshman for Notre Dame on defense in 2026?
I'm going with Joey O'Brien. I said this earlier in the offseason. I don't know if Notre Dame is trying to force the issue to play four safeties, but if a player forces the issue to play four safeties, no, I think that they will. In an ideal world, you have four guys that can all rotate in, so Luke Talich doesn't have to be the next man in at both spots, even though I'm fairly confident the coaching staff is all the confidence in the world that he can do both. I think Joey O'Brien just forces his way on the field. There's some players that you just watch and go through practice. You watch them go through the motions. You watch their impact in practice and it becomes inevitable that they're just going to end up playing. And I think that's going to be Joey O'Brien. So I have him, but there was a lot of candidates on the board for this one,
Including my pick of Rodney Dunham.
yeah.
I think Joey O'Brien is an outstanding pick. I thought about Aiden Pouncey. That was definitely a guy that I considered as well. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Rodney Dunham. I think Rodney's going to be, just like Joey, an immediate part of the rotation. I think he's going to earn more and more and more of a role as the season goes on as well. And in a year where Notre Dame has two freshman All-Americans, I probably shouldn't have said that because that might be a little preview of our bold predictions tomorrow. I think Rodney Dunham is a guy that has a really big season for Notre Dame. Maybe it's not early as he kind of gets his feet wet, but I think as the deeper we get into the year, the more impactful he's going to be. But I think both of these kids are going to have really good years. Really good years.
Agreed. I think when they're on the field, you're not going to be able to tell that they're freshmen. I think they're going to have outstanding seasons. I'm with you completely.
Yep.
Let's talk about
There's a lot of people that talk about Joey O'Brien's size. I think you guys have to understand if you see him in person, you don't have that problem. We've both seen him in person. I get it. He's tall and he looks skinny, but if you actually see him in person, he's bigger than you think.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's going to be the problem that some people think is there, but he's bigger than you think. Kyle Hamilton was that way. Remember, people thought he was really skinny and gangly, but when you see him in person, like, this guy's kind of broad. You know, like he's actually put together. He's not as big as Kyle was, like broad as Kyle was, but Joey's bigger than people think. You don't really notice that. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I felt that too. Then we saw him in person in the spring and then fall camp. I'm like, he's bigger than you think he is. He is. Same with Aiden Pouncey.
Yeah.
They're bigger than you think. And Aiden's put on even more weight than Joey has since he's got here. But they're bigger than you think that they are. They are.
Let's talk about the top transfer on defense. Definitely a bigger pool to choose from than on the offensive side of the ball, for sure. This one was difficult. On offense, like we talked about, it was one guy. First of all, they brought in two transfers, and one of them we have yet to see in a live practice.
I mean, if you didn't get that one right, Trev, I don't really know what we're doing here. You know what I mean? Like, Trev, you know he didn't transfer, right? You know he's been here for 3 years? Okay. He doesn't play for Notre Dame, Trevor. I don't know what you're talking about. I thought you were going to say something like, Darian Mensah, because he's going to throw 2 pick sixes against Notre Dame. I mean, something funny like that, but like if it ain't Mylan Graham, it's going to be somebody like that because there aren't any other options at this point in time.
Oh, that's funny. No, that's good. A lot of people to choose from, Brian. Who did you end up going with top transfer?
I'll be honest with you, Trevor. I am shocked that we saw this one the same. And yeah, I'm stealing Trev's thunder a little bit because I thought this is the one that it's very unlikely we're going to pick the same guy because we're not even sure that our pick, DJ McKinney, will even start for Notre Dame this year because he's still in a battle with Jaden Sanders. Then there's Francis Brew, who I think is going to have a really good year for Notre Dame. There's Tion Gray, who I think is going to have a really good year for Notre Dame. And there's Keon Keeley, who I think is going to have a really good year for Notre Dame. So there's 5 legitimate options here. And I was like, there's no way we're going to pick the same guy here. No way. And we did. And we went with DJ McKinney. At the end of the day, Trev, I feel like DJ's going to be the starter at field, maybe not in the opener. We'll see if he's able to do enough to overcome Jaden Sanders, who was here in the spring. But at some point in time this year, I just think that light's going to go on for DJ. Maybe it already has. We don't know. We haven't seen it. Maybe it has. But I think that light's going to go on for DJ, and he's going to have a big year. And I think the thing that I think is going to really work for DJ is he's been in a program the last 2 years, which the more and more we find out is just like there was like no coaching going on. Not like you need in college. And now that he's being coached up to really understand the game technically and schematically and how to prepare and all those things, I think at some point in time this year, his game is going to explode. And he's going to go off. Maybe it's not in the opener. Maybe it's not in September. But at some point in time, he's going to become that guy. And I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing that happen. Trev, you could pick any of the 5, and I wouldn't have been like, really? That's your pick? Keon would probably be the only one that I'd be like, okay, like, it's a backup. That's an interesting take. But he's going to play a bunch. And, again, we don't know who's going to start between Jaden Sanders and DJ McKinney. 5 great options here, and it just speaks to the talent that they went out and got in the portal class on defense. But you and I picked the same one.
Yeah, we share a lot of the
same. You thought you were cooking
content.
When you picked DJ McKinney, huh? You thought, oh, there's no way Brad's gonna have this one. I thought the same thing. That's what I thought. I was like, there's no way he's gonna pick DJ McKinney.
No, there's a lot that back up why we both picked DJ McKinney. Some of it, I agree with everything that you said. That factored in for me as well. He's also the only transfer that I think that I would argue gives Notre Dame 2 first-round draft picks in one position group. Like, I love Francis Brew. I don't know if he's going to be a first-round draft pick. I love Tion Gray. His game has a long way to go before I'm willing to give him. He has a first-round NFL draft pick frame at 6'5", 330. Need to see his game evolve a little bit more. Jaden Sanders is going into his sophomore year. Keon Keeley needed broken down a little bit to be then built back up and break some of the bad habits that he picked up in Tuscaloosa, or just none of the habits that he picked up in Tuscaloosa. So a little bit more of a work in progress. He could be that down the road, probably a little bit more next year. Would not shock me if it happened this year. But DJ McKinney, if that light bulb goes on for him and Leonard Moore could be the number 1 cornerback duo in the country, and there's a ton of good ones out there. So that's also what factored into me picking DJ McKinney for this one, for sure.
That was a tough pick. Love the pick, Trev. Let's go to the position groups. Let's talk about the top linemen. This can be D-ends or D-tackles. It can be taken any way that you want to take it, but it really boils down to who's just the best guy at this position. So when you take your pick for who the best lineman is for Notre Dame in 2026, who do you got? I love this pick, by the way. Sorry.
Bryce Young. And some of this is me speaking it into existence a little bit, but we've talked on this show ad nauseum around what a Bryce Young breakout would be. He's the catalyst for this defense. And a lot of great candidates here, a ton. I mean, there's arguments to be made for Armel Mukam, Jason Onye, obviously Boubacar Traore. We talk about Francis Brew, but I'm going with Bryce Young on this one. His ascension, and if he ends up being the top defensive lineman that Notre Dame has this year, this unit's going to be absolutely filthy. So some of it is going into I hope this comes to fruition, but he has all the talent in the world. He has the frame, he has the size. If he ends up having that type of season, this Notre Dame defensive line is going to be on another level.
No question. I'm still going Boubacar, though. I think everything you said is possible. I think that Bryce Young could absolutely be that kind of guy. But I love what Boubacar we've seen it from, and I think Boubacar has really put in the work. Boubacar Traore has really put in the work to grow his game. one of the things that you always worry about with any young person is when they have sort of that first taste of success, you don't really know what they're going to do with it. That's true for Boubacar. It was true for Breonte Johnson. It was true for Leonard Moore after 24. It's true after CJ Carr this year. It's true for Jeremiah Love after 2024. And Jadarian Price. I mean, it's true for everybody. Once you have that success, it's like, okay, now what do you do? Because some young men will kind of be like, all right, I've arrived. I'm the man now. And they don't put in the work to climb, now that they've kind of got to a level of success and the mountaintop was within range. Like, no, I'm good right here. This is cool. I'm the man now. You know what I mean? Because I'm above everybody else. I'm not to the mountaintop, but I'm above everybody else. And they lose their focus. Others get to that level and they're like, I'm here, but I can see the mountaintop. And I'm going to put in the work to take it even further and get to that even further. And I love what Irish English just said. It's the classic Rocky III syndrome, and that's absolutely correct. And that was one of the questions I had about Boubacar, not because there's anything about him that makes me think he's inherently prone to that. It's just what I always think about a guy who went from not having done a whole lot, mainly because of injuries, to, wow, he's really good. But from what we've seen from Boubacar, and then what I've heard from my sources inside the program about Boubacar, it sounds like he sees the mountaintop and he's even hungrier now to reach it than he was before when he was still at the summit. You know what I mean? Or at the, the bottom, right? He was like, okay, I got to go all the way up there. Let me put in the work. And now that he's almost there, it's like, no, I'm really going to grind now. And I want to take that next step. And that's why I think that even if Bryce has a big breakout, he's going to have to really break out to be better than Boubacar. I think they're going to be a dynamic 1-2 punch. I'll talk more about that later. But I think Boubacar is going to have that big jump. I absolutely love what this kid's going to bring to the table this year. I could see a world where Boubacar starts strong. He starts garnering a lot of blocking attention, and then Bryce then takes off. But I also think if Bryce kind of starts off hot, that's going to make it even harder to double on Boubacar, which then makes him still be that kind of. So either way you look at it, man, this is a great opportunity for these two edge players. But I'm going with Boubacar. I just think he's an elite talent, and he's obviously a more established player. And there's not as far to go for him to be that elite player than there is for Bryce, who's obviously has to show a lot more.
I get that completely. I will give more of my thoughts on that when we get more into the statistical superlatives later in the show. But I'll just put it this way. I agree with everything that you said about Boubacar, which kind of leads me into this next superlative that we have. Top playmaker. And as a quick reminder, this is, as a kind of a backstory for this one, which skill player makes the most big-time plays? It could be, as far as yardage, or I guess for defensive terms, it could be like interceptions, big plays from a clutch or highlight reel standpoint, who makes the big hits, things like that. So, Brian, who is your top playmaker on Notre Dame's defense this year?
I'm going Leonard Moore because I think, number one, Leonard Moore is going to be in a lot of matchups this year against really good receivers. He's going to make his fair share of pass breakups. He's going to make his fair share of interceptions. He's going to make some big tackles. They used him a little bit as a blitzer early last year. Then when he hurt his ankle, they kind of stopped doing that. Maybe they use that a little bit more. But I also think there's going to be times you're going to be like, dude, that pick was on Leonard Moore. Wait a minute, what are you talking about, Brian? They threw the ball over here. Yeah, look, the read was there. The quarterback panicked because Leonard was just locking the dude down, and he threw blind to the backside, and Breonte picked it off. But that was on Leonard. It's kind of like when a quarterback's getting hit in the face and the ball floats up in the air and somebody picks it. You're like, yeah, I know Drake Bowen picked it off, but that was on Bryce. Bryce is the one that drilled the quarterback and caused the ball to go floating in the air that somebody picked off. Leonard's going to make a lot of those plays this year, in my opinion. And there's just going to be times where it's like, yeah, you're doing these things because Leonard is just flat out locking that guy down on the boundary. And so some of it won't be as easy to see. But I think he's my top playmaker on defense.
Love it. My top playmaker on defense is Boubacar Traore. I agree with everything that you said about the secondary. But it's going to be hard for Leonard Moore. It's going to be hard for Christian Gray. It's going to be hard for DJ McKinney to get interceptions if the quarterback doesn't have the opportunity to get the ball off. And that's how I see this one playing out. Mostly from a clutch standpoint. I see this being like, we've talked a lot about Khalid Kareem on this show. And he might not have led the team in sacks, but whenever you needed that big clutch play, 53 was there making that happen. I think that's going to be Boubacar this year. Whether it's coming flat down the line, getting a big stop in the run game, whether that's getting a pressure or a sack on the quarterback that forces a throwaway or an errant throw. I think it starts up front, especially with this defensive system, and I'm going with Boubacar. But Leonard Moore is an outstanding pick. You can't look. This is what made the defense so difficult. We could have talked about Christian Gray. Has there been a defensive back that has made more clutch plays than Christian Gray?
In the last 5 years, the only argument that you have is Xavier Watts. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah. You could have went with Christian Gray here, Leonard Moore, obviously, Boubacar, Bryce. You could have went with any one of the linebackers. This is what made the defense so difficult. But, Brian, you went Leonard Moore. I went Boubacar. Let's talk about breakout player on defense. Again, a lot of categories for this one because this side of the ball, just in nature, more so than the offense, is going to rotate at every position group. Who's your top breakout player on Notre Dame's defense?
So let me preface before I say who mine is. I thought long and hard about going with Armel Mukam. I love what I've seen from Armel in fall camp. I love his attitude. And by the way, it was hilarious watching that Jermichael Finley video where Armel gets up there and he runs up the steps. And I'm like, linemen are always the smartest ones. If there's not a quarterback in the room, then expect the lineman to be the smartest guy in the room. I thought that was hilarious. By the way, so some of the stuff they've put out this year, I'm like, why are we talking about like this? Why is this what they're talking about? That was so funny. I loved how they did that. The kids play like Nolan and Aeneas really look like two bickering like siblings.
Yeah,
it was great to watch them go at it. Like I'm like, where are they going with this? And Kadon starts off, and I'm like, all right, it's in his blood. He's because I didn't know it was a skit. I just thought it was like And then he runs right into the wall and falls down. His dad's like, I'm so embarrassed right now. Like, I'm so ashamed of you right now. It was so great. And then I'm like, I didn't even notice he wasn't in the skit anymore. Like he had left. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Leonard's going to be the one that does it. Right. And then he's like, he's trying to, it was so well done, dude. I thought that was great. I did love that. And, but you saw it there. I mean, he looks like $1 million right now. And he had a great spring. He's had a great fall camp so far. He's making a lot of plays. I really thought long and hard about going with Armel Mukam. I did. But at the end of the day, I got to go with Bryce Young for every reason that you said earlier. I think Bryce has a big-time breakout season. Do I think he'll be as good as Boubacar? No, that's why I went with Boubacar. But I don't think it's like, this guy went freaking Bryce Young for the top lineman. Do you know who Boubacar Traore? I did not have that response because I could see it. At the end of the day, when I look at this, I see Boubacar being like playing like a top 10 draft pick, and I see Bryce playing like a top 30 draft pick this year. And then next year, Bryce then has his top 10 draft pick breakout. So like this year, I think Bryce has sort of a Boubacar Traore-esque breakout like we saw last year. 9 to 11 tackles for loss in the regular season, 6 to 7 sacks, great year. A lot of buzz, impact player. But Boubacar has more of an Isaiah Foskey type of season. 14, 15 tackles for loss, 10, 11 sacks, plays like that. That's how I see these two going this year, which then makes Bryce a true breakout player because he would surpass his career production in both categories and become a guy that people are talking about a lot moving forward. So that's why I'm going with Bryce as my breakout. I really wanted to go with Armel Mukam, but I just... the gap from Bryce to be a breakout is not as great as the gap from where Armel's coming from to be a breakout.
I actually turned to the linebacker room for this one, and I'm going with Madden Faramo. He has looked tremendous in fall camp, and I think he's going to warrant more snaps in an incredibly loaded room. I think that's where his breakout is going to be the most highlighted by. I don't think he's going to lead the room in tackles. I don't think he's going to lead the room in tackles for a loss. But forcing your way up in the rotation in a room that has Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliamuasa, Jaden Osbury, and Jalen Sneed, I think is going to be noteworthy. And I think Madden Faramo is going to warrant a lot of defensive snaps this year. So that's where I'm going. It was I was in the same boat as you were. It was very difficult to not go with Armel Mukum. Very difficult. But there was also, to a degree, I still have to see something of it. Whereas with Madden last year, it's like, hey, we said at the time last year in fall camp, the second that light bulb goes on, he's going to be darn near impossible to keep off the field. And that lasted till the third game of the regular season. And on his first series on defense, he got his hand in a passing lane, tipped it up, and Christian Gray picked it off. Whereas for Armel, this is by far the best he's looked, but he's looked pretty good in all of the other off seasons and then left a lot to be desired. So now, having said that, I think this is a year that he breaks out. But that was another separator for me there as well. But it was very difficult to not go with him. Very difficult.
That was a challenge. This next one, not so much. So Trev said earlier, comeback player can be one of two things. It can be a guy that was injured last year, didn't play a whole lot. In our case, I went with a guy that missed 8 games. Trev went with a guy that missed 6 games, had missed, 13 games the year before, and Ashton Craig. But it can also mean a guy that's coming back from a down season, a disappointing season, a season where maybe the narrative around him is really negative, and he bounces back and has a really good season. And that's where you and I are going on defense, Trev. We have the same comeback player of the year award. Let's tell people who that is.
It's Christian Gray, the guy who moved into nickel. He has been probably one of the most polarizing Notre Dame players that I've talked about amongst friends, amongst other fans, and the differences between him vary from he might be the best corner on the team if he gets his head on straight outside of Leonard Moore, or why does he have a scholarship at Notre Dame? Those are kind of the two very extreme sides of the coin with Christian Gray. But I think this year, he puts himself in a position where he's able to squash that narrative, especially moving to a new position. There's a lot of questions. Is he physical enough? Is he going to stay healthy enough? Is his coverage going to be good enough? And whereas we don't even have those concerns about Jaden Sanders or DJ McKinney, who have yet to play a game in a Notre Dame uniform. At the end of the day, we're talking about a player who had a 98-yard pick six against USC to seal that game in a 1-touchdown game. Talk about a guy that picked up a big 4th down stop earlier in that game, played great against Texas A&M earlier in 2024, had the game-ending interception against Penn State. So we have seen great flashes from him, and I think this year they're not going to be flashes. Now, I think he's going to be a consistent player all year, and when we sit back and look, I think there's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans that were on the negative extreme side with him concede and say, yeah, Christian Gray is really that good. So he was my comeback player of the year, as was he for you?
I had a little interesting nugget about Christian Gray in the intel piece I put out the other day as well. I think, was it like Sunday night, technically Monday morning, that I put that out? That was encouraging. That helped solidify this pick for me, but I was probably going to go with this pick anyway, but that definitely helped solidify things for me. Yeah, Christian Gray's our impact. Let's talk about most outstanding, Trev. We laid the groundwork for this earlier. This is just the most dominant player. This is the best player, the best playmaker, just their most outstanding play. It kind of is what it is. It's most outstanding. We have the same guy for this one as well, Trev. I think everyone's going to have. I think this one.
Yeah, everybody is most likely going to be on the same page with this one, but it's Leonard Moore. He's the best cornerback in the country. I don't think that that's debatable. ESPN named him as the number 1 overall defender coming back in college football. He was a unanimous All-American as a true sophomore. He goes into his third and probably final season with Notre Dame, and I think he ends it off with an absolute bang. For all of the impact that you mentioned earlier, about being like the top playmaker for Notre Dame's defense, there's going to be so many things that you're not going to be able to see on the TV copy of games that Leonard Moore is just taking away an entire side of the field. When people say that, it's not conjecture. It's because they're able to sit down and pop in the all-22, and it's like, yeah, the quarterback is basically making half-field reads because 15 is taking away an entire side. So, yes, I'm with you completely. Most outstanding player on Notre Dame's defense this year is going to be Leonard Moore.
Yep, same for me.
Let's talk about MVP. As we talked about on the offensive side of the ball, most outstanding and the MVP and the most valuable can be different. It was different for me on the offense. It was the same for you on defense. Is that the same for you on the defensive side of the ball? Do you have the same guy, or are you going different?
I do not. I have the same guy as you, but I do not have the same most outstanding. I'm going Drake Bowen. And again, it's not so much about the best player, but more so about who's the most valuable. When you look at Drake Bowen, number one, he's going to be productive, and he's been productive the last 2 years. I think we're going to see another year of. I think we're going to see a year of improved production from Drake this year, and he's the guy that led Notre Dame in tackles last season, and he was third in tackles the year before, and the two guys ahead of him are no longer on the football team. Nobody over the last 2 years has produced more tackles than him, and I think he's going to be even more productive this year. A, he's healthier. B, as we saw later in the year, he was a lot more productive once he got more comfortable in the system, even when he was not healthy last season. So when I just look at all those things and factor in all those things, and we've talked about this with Drake, I just think he's a guy that's going to have a really big year. But then there's the other parts to it as well, Trev. There's the playmaking aspects of it, which is important. But then there's also the aspects of, okay, but sure, you're making plays, but you're never going to be as good as Leonard Moore. You're just not. So then what do you bring into the table? Well, that's where kind of Drake falls into the same line here. Is he's bringing a lot more than just that to the table. He's also a guy that's bringing a lot of leadership to the table, and that's where like him and Adon Schuler were two guys that I strongly considered here in this conversation because of the fact that he is just such a great leader for this football team, and a guy that we've seen going back to 2024. Just he was the captain on the field. Even though he wasn't a captain, he was the captain on the field. He's going to be a 2-year captain. He's the one that makes sure the D-line knows what they're doing. He's the one that makes sure the linebackers around him know what they're doing. He's the one that makes sure that this team is going in the right direction. He's the one that's got to be in the locker room making sure that they're not losing focus, that they're not getting too big for their britches, that they're not buying into the hype that's going on around them, to make sure that they remember all of the things that they're playing for. You know what I mean? And he very much is going to play sort of like a Drew Tranquil 2017 role, you know what I mean, when we look back at it. And that's why when I talk about MVP, it's hard for me to think of anyone that's going to be more valuable to how they impact everybody else on top of being a productive playmaker than Drake Bowen.
Couldn't agree more. If Notre Dame is going to do what many people predict them to do this year, win the national title like they're favorites to do right now on FanDuel, they're going to need this defense to play a big part in that coming to fruition. And Drake Bowen is one of the primary drivers of success on that side of the ball. You hear people talk about it all the time, even sometimes unwarranted in interviews like, hey, Drake's kind of the dude. We all look to him. How we feel about CJ Carr in the huddle of crunch time moments on the offense is how a lot of people on defense feel about number 34 on that side of the ball in those big moments. I'm with you completely on Drake Bowen, man. He's going to have a huge year. Absolutely huge. Brian, let's kind of get into the stat projection. Same thing that we did on the offensive side of the ball. We're going to start out with the top tackler in a single game this year. A lot of candidates for this one. What direction did you go with?
Top tackler in a single game, I'm going with Adon Schuler. I think he had the second best tackle game last year. Drake had number one at 14. I have a feeling that at times during the regular season, we're going to see a little bit more of a rotation at inside linebacker just because they want to keep everybody healthy. And I think there's a desire to get, some of the younger players going, or maybe to keep some people happy. And more importantly, just to keep guys fresh for the long run. So, but I mean, I could easily see it being Drake. He was that guy last year. But I just have a feeling Adon was 2. I think if I'm looking at this, I'm trying to find somebody else. Drake had the top tackle game at 14, and I believe that Adon was second with an 11 tackle game. I can't find anybody else. I'm looking through it here, and I don't see anybody else that had a better tackle game than Adon's 11 against USC. And so I'm going through it. Jaden Osbury's highest was 8. Tay Johnson's highest was 8. Kingston's highest was 9. So he was second last year. I just think whether it's Navy, whether it's some team that Notre Dame jumps all over, Notre Dame's offense goes 5 plays and has 2 touchdowns or something like that. There's going to be this game where the other team is either having to throw a bunch and Adon is just lighting dudes up in the pass game, or a game where the team is running the ball a lot. Like I could see a game against Navy where Adon's just make all over the field, having sort of that 15, 16 tackle game. I could see something like that. I just think there's going to be that game this year where Adon just makes a ton of plays.
I love that pick. I was between Adon or the guy that I ultimately ended up going with, and I am going with Jaden Ausberry. I think in typical Jaden Ausberry fashion, he's going to lead the team in tackles in one game, and we're just going to kind of not know about it. Like, it'll be kind of like after the fact. We'll be sitting in the post-game show, and it'll be like, dude, Jaden Ausberry was everywhere. But then some point in the offseason, it's like, dude, he had 13 tackles this game. You know what I mean? And it's going to be something like that. Now, I could see it coming against Navy, Stanford, one of those teams. But I'm going to go with Jaden Ausberry. I think there's going to be a game where Brian Jean-Marie keeps him on the field because he's absolutely cooking. And I think he'll be able to take that home. Now, we've broken down who we believe it's going to be in a game over the course of the season. I have a feeling we're going to go in the same direction here. But who do you have as the top tackler over the course of the season?
My top tackler over the course of a season, Trev, is going to be Drake Bowen. And I think this is kind of an easy one. Even though I do think we're going to see a bit of a rotation this year, I do think it's going to be Drake. I still think he's going to have the most tackles on the team. I think he's going to be very productive on a per-snap basis. He was their leading tackler last year by 14. And he had fewer tackles last year than he did the year before. Now, he played 4 fewer games. He had more tackles per game last year than he had the year before. But and I think there's going to be a rotation of safety as well. I just think the consistency we're going to see from Drake Bowen this year makes me believe he's going to be their top tackler in 2026. As long as he's healthy, I have a hard time seeing it be anybody else. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. I'm also going with Drake Bowen here. One, I believe that the interior of the defensive line and the makeup with bringing in Tion Gray, Francis Brew, Armel Mookum, we both predict to have a big, massive breakout season with Elijah Hughes playing a bigger role. Jason Onye's back. I believe that that's going to do a lot for the Notre Dame linebacking core. Chris Ash's defense starts very much up front. And I think that Drake Bowen, Kingston, Jaden Ausberry, Jalen Sneed, especially Madden Framo, who's my breakout player, I think they're going to reap the benefits of that. And so I also have Drake Bowen as my leading tackler. I don't think that that's much of a controversial pick to your point. I mean, last year you talk about what he did, and he was a very high-volume tackler over the course of the season as well. I mean, he ended up leading the team last year in total tackles. Doesn't surprise that many people, but he had 14 total tackles against Boston College. He was all over the field. He had 7 against Stanford, 5 against Navy, 7 against NC State, 5 against Boise State. For everybody talking about how bad he was in the season opener, he still had 8 total tackles. Now, we can talk about assignment correctness and the things that he has to do better out in coverage, but he was still a very productive player, and that was still not with the full understanding of what he was doing. Now he's going into year 2 of the Chris Ash defense. Now he has bigger interior defensive linemen that are going to be two-gapping for him instead of asking, with all due respect to him, Donovan Heinrich at 6'1", 6'2", 275, the two-gap a 6'6", 340-pound guard all evening. Now they have Francis Brew to do that. Yeah, he's 6'1", 285, but he's the strongest defensive lineman on the team. Now you have Tion Gray, who's 6'5", 330. Now you have Jason Onye, who's 6'5", 295. Now you have Armel Mookum, who's 6 foot, 300 pounds. Now you have Elijah Hughes, who's 6'3", 295. So the makeup is a little bit different. I think there's going to be a lot of games this season that Drake Bowen is able to feast. I'd keep my eye out on North Carolina, obviously Stanford. I mean, shoot, he could have a massive game in the season opener. We get a lot of questions around, hey, how are you going to combat Colton Joseph as a mobile quarterback? I think 34 is going to have a field day with that one. And then obviously Navy, Syracuse will probably end up having a big game. And honestly, another one to keep an eye out on is BYU on the road out in Provo. Drake Bowen might have just an absolutely monster game this year. Absolutely monster.
I can see that.
Brian, let's talk about the top sacker in a game this season. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about Bryce Young and Boubacar. What direction did you go in for a single game this year?
I'm going Bryce. It's kind of like what you talked about. I think there's just going to be that game where he's just going to go off. So
yeah,
there's going to be some 3-sack game that he has this year. It's simple. I think it's Bryce who's going to have that monster game. He might even be top 2, like tied for the second or whatever. But I think it's going to be Bryce.
I also went with Bryce Young, and I know there were some questions around, not questions maybe, but I I went with Bryce Young as my top defensive lineman, and I think some of that's going to be his tertiary impact. I think a lot of attention early on in the season is going to be to Bubakar because he's the proven commodity, right? He led the team in total pressures, led the team in tackles for loss, led the team in sacks. I think early on the game plan is going to be geared towards stopping Bubakar and making sure number 5 doesn't become a game wrecker. I have to imagine that's what Luke Fickell's thinking, what Pat Fitzgerald is thinking, what Scott Abel is thinking, the head coach at Rice, and I got to believe that's what Barry Odom is thinking. Bubakar Traore had good games the last 2 times he's faced Purdue. Where Bryce Young is going to have a game this season where people are really like, oh, okay, Notre Dame has a legitimate duo at defensive end. It's not just one guy. One of the issues that we've talked about before in the past where it's like, yeah, you had Isaiah Foskey and it's like, okay, you had Javonte Jean-Baptiste and this year I think Bryce is going to have a game where he has 2.5, 3 sacks that really opens up the door. That's why I put him as my best defensive lineman because his breakout performance is going to allow the people around him to be more successful. I'm with you completely going with Bryce.
And the reason that I'm going to go with Bubakar for most sacks on the season is why I went with him as the best lineman, in that it will be that consistency, that steadiness throughout the course of the year. Maybe Bryce has the best big game or two, but Bubakar is going to be the 1.5, 2, 1, and just over the course of an entire season, just be that guy. He was pretty good last year. I see him raising his level of play quite a bit this season.
Yeah, well, I get that completely. I also have Bubakar leading the team in sacks. I think just over the course of a 15, 16 game season, to your point about having the 1.5, a half, 2, 1, 1.5, it'll add up over the course of a season. So I'm with you there completely. Let's talk about on defense, top interceptions. Now we're going to start obviously with the game level. Who do you see? Who on Notre Dame's defense do you have leading the defense in interceptions in a single game?
This one I was so back and forth on it, and honestly, this one's tougher because you could see a 3-sack game. I mean, Jerry Tillery had a 4-sack game a couple years ago. We've seen that, but more than 2 picks in a game is a little tough. I'm going to be a little bit of a cheater here, and I'm going with a 3-way tie. I'm going with Breonte Johnson, Christian Gray, and DJ McKinney all have a 2-pick game this year.
Like that. I like that.
Leonard Moore won't have a 2-pick game because I'm just convincing myself that there's no way coaches and quarterbacks are that stupid to throw to him that often. I have a hard time believing that, but could be. So I'm going Breonte Johnson, Christian Gray, DJ McKinney all have a 2-sack game.
I love that. I'm going to go with the Don Shuler. I think by process of elimination, there's going to be 2, because I came down to 2. I came down to DJ McKinney and a Don Shuler. In good faith, I can't imagine some of the offensive coordinators targeting Leonard Moore or Breonte Johnson's side of the field. I just can't. They had 9 combined interceptions last year between the two of them in 12 games. I just can't buy into the fact that an offensive coordinator or quarterback would be dumb enough to throw in their direction. I think Don Shuler is going to absolutely reap the benefits of that and take advantage when he does get targeted. So I'm going with a Don. Would not shock me if it's Christian. Would not shock me if it's DJ McKinney. Would not shock me if it's Breonte. And honestly, based on last year, I wouldn't be beside myself if it was Leonard Moore. But over the course of the season, how do you see this one playing out? Who do you think leads the team in picks?
As far as over the course of the season, Trev, I'm going with Breonte Johnson. Look, just the way that Notre Dame uses him, it's going to be really hard to completely avoid him. And he's so rangy. It's easier for me to understand people throwing at Breonte than to Leonard because there's times where you don't even know that Breonte is covering the guy you're going to throw to.
Sure.
I also think that what we saw this last year with, you think of Breonte's pick 6 against Pitt, you think of Jalen Stroman's against Syracuse, you think of even to a degree of Don Shuler's pick 2 against Pitt. The way that they disguise coverages and roll coverages and things like that, there's going to be times you think you have a window and then next thing you know, they're rolling their coverage and Breonte's jumping the ball where he's not even in your line of sight when you get like here. And then you realize, oh no, you know what I mean? And that's just going to happen. Yeah. And then there's going to be tip balls. There's going to be Jaden Alsbury, Kingston, Drake getting a tip on a ball, and it's going to get picked off by Briante on the back of the end of the defense. I mean, you think, well, man, why do people keep throwing at Xavier Watts in 2024? I mean, he was the defensive player of the year in college football the year before and had 7 picks. And you're like, why do they keep throwing at him? Because you can't avoid a safety in the same way in today's era. It's not like you're playing cover 2 all day and you can say, well, I'm just not going to throw to Steve Atwater's side or something like that, or Ronnie Lott's side. Or hey, you're a cover 3 team, which won't throw to the middle of the field. Well, you can't avoid that. You can't. And then the way that Notre Dame plays their safeties, you just can't avoid them. And that's why, even though he had 7 picks a year before, Xavier still had 6 the next year. Because also sometimes those picks are happening because you miss on somebody. The big pick that Xavier had in the postseason against Indiana was a ball that was intended for somebody else, and he was in the right spot to come up behind and catch the overthrow. And that's what really instinctive and rangy safeties are able to do, and that's why I think Briante leads the team in interceptions this season. I think he would have last year if he didn't get hurt. I mean, he would have had to pick 6 against Syracuse, not Jalen Stroman. That's because that was the position he was going to play. So that would be mine.
I'm also going with Briante Johnson. There was even a couple before he got hurt that he dropped. I mean, there was one against Boston College that he knew he dropped. Laid on the field like this for a little bit because he was so upset at himself. I just don't see him not taking advantage of those opportunities this year, plus playing a bigger sample size of games this season too. I'm with you. I think Briante leads the team in interceptions.
I think we talked about this, but he would have also probably had another pick 6 against Pitt if Drake Bowen doesn't break up the pass. You remember that?
Yeah.
When they was rolling to the right and he throws it and Drake jumps up and tips it, which Drake did his job. But if Drake doesn't touch that ball, Briante's coming downhill and undercutting that route, he's probably picking it off and taking it back to the house again. That's just going to happen.
There's one thing that I forgot to ask when we were talking about top transfers. We covered it on offense. We forgot to mention it on defense. Who that left Notre Dame's program do you see on defense having a big year at their new schools?
There's 3 guys that I've considered: Jadon Blair at Missouri, Cree Thomas at Colorado, and Josh Burnham at Indiana. If everybody's healthy, I'm leaning towards Josh Burnham. He's the most known commodity. I'd probably rank him Josh, Cree, and Jadon. Jadon, from what I'm told, is going to play a bunch at Missouri this year. Cree is probably going to be Colorado's best corner. And then, of course, I think you're going to see Josh Burnham, especially with the recent ruling. I think that the Big Ten's ruling is going to mean that I don't believe Stephen Daly and Kellen White are going to be eligible to play for Indiana this year. I've got to look more into that because I believe they were actually signed by teams, as undrafted free agents, not just getting the camp invites. Like, there's a difference between, what we saw from oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. I can't believe that I'm drawing a blank because I know the family and the running back, Jake. Oh, goodness gracious. I can't believe that yes, Jake Tefelsky. I'm so going to get in trouble for that. Jake Tefelsky got invited to 2 different camps. That's different than getting signed as an undrafted free agent. That is your no-go. So like the guy from UCLA that just got ruled eligible after the Big Ten changed their rule to not let drafted players. They're like, well, this guy was invited to minicamp. Why was he allowed to come back? Because he was invited to minicamp. That's different than being signed as an undrafted free agent or as someone who was drafted. So I believe that that's the case. So I don't think that Stephen Daly and Kellen Wyatt fall under his category. I don't hold me to this because this is all changing so quickly. And this is exactly why we didn't spend 30 minutes talking about it the other day, because I was like, I want to see how this whole thing plays out.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that those guys are going to be able to play at Indiana based on the Big Ten's rules. The new rules, again, don't quote me on that. And then that's going to create more opportunities, in my opinion, for Josh Burnham to go do what we think Josh Burnham's going to do. So I'm going with Josh Burnham at Indiana. But I won't be shocked if it's Cree Thomas or if it's Jadon Blair either.
I agree with that trio of players. I'm going to add in one kind of off the beaten path. I would keep my eye out for Bodie Cahoon at Boston College. He might be one of the lone bright spots on that team this year. I mean, Max Bulla, a lot of other players said it during his time at Notre Dame. He might have been the most athletic guy in the room. Man, I think on a defense that has a I'll be nice, call it a bleak outlook on the season, he might be one of the bright spots. So I'm not putting him in the same trio as Cree Thomas, Jadon Blair, or Josh Burnham, but I would keep my eye out on Bodie Cahoon too.
I like that one. Some good options.
Absolutely.
Wish a couple of them were still options at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian, let's kind of dive into some national superlatives here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Just got done talking about Notre Dame player predictions. Now it's time to turn our attention to the national setting and give you guys a window in. We're breaking this down by position group. Brian mentioned it at the start of the show. We're not talking about Davey O'Brien Award or the Manning Passing Award because, look, most likely whoever the top quarterback is going to go through and win all of those awards, most likely. We're not talking about Maxwell or the Biletnikoff. So we're breaking this down into position groups. On offense, we're talking quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive linemen, not the top offensive line, top offensive linemen. And then on defense, we're talking about top D end, top D tackle, top linebacker, top corner, top safety. Then we're going to also give some more big picture superlatives as well, which will be fun to dive into. But where we're going to start is with the quarterback position. Listening to two former quarterbacks right now, and we kind of got to start here. So, Brian, who in all of college football is going to be your top quarterback in 2026?
This was so much fun to do, Trev, because there are very few easy answers. I'm looking at this entire breakdown, and for me, there were two positions where it was like, dog, it's kind of a no-brainer. And I think you guys know what those two positions are. It's receiver and cornerback, and we'll talk about who those are. But, quarterback was one where it's like, dude, there's a lot of elite players that could be here. We could go with Dante Moore. We could go with Arch Manning. We could go with Julian Sain. We could go with Trinidad Chambliss. We could go with Darian Mensah. We could have a breakout player maybe kind of be this guy, a Byron Brown, a Malik Washington, Josh Hoover becomes the next Fernando Mendoza. There's so many different storylines and talented quarterbacks to go with when you're talking about a year where you're talking about NFL draft analysts saying this may be the deepest quarterback class in a long time.
Yeah.
That's a lot of great options, but I'm going with CJ Carr, and I like the fact that there's national people saying this as well, so it's not just a couple Notre Dame guys that people can say, oh, you're just homers. We're not the only ones that think this. And it really just comes down to the expectation for CJ to take that year to jump where he's going to carry this team. He's going to become more of a playmaker this year for Notre Dame. And the talent around him is going to be pretty darn good as well. And that's going to allow CJ to, in a year where if somebody wants to say it's this guy, I'm not going to argue with you. But for me, just someone who's going to make everybody around him better, someone who's going to be a big-time playmaker, somebody's going to put up big numbers, I'm going with CJ Carr.
I am too, and I think his ability as an elevator is what stood out to me the most because, and I'm not saying that Julian Sain can't or Dante Moore can't or won't. I'm not saying that Arch Manning can or won't, but of those four quarterbacks, CJ's the only one returning national narrative-wise that doesn't have that go-to guy. Obviously, Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith. Cam Coleman's garnering a lot of offseason attention, and with Oregon, there's a lot of talk about DeCorian Moore and Evan Stewart, whereas CJ Carr, despite not having one of those guys, is still being predicted as the Heisman Trophy winner on outlets like FanDuel, and Jordan Reed just ranked him as a top 3 NFL draft pick in 2027 without having those weapons.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to speak volumes, and I think that's really going to put people on display and really put CJ Carr on display to some people that might not be as familiar with his game yet. So I went with CJ as well.
Well, I mean, just what we're seeing in the chat, there hasn't been a position yet where we've seen more different names thrown out. We've seen Julian Sain in the chat. We said we wanted to see your guys' thoughts and opinions. Here's what I've seen Julian Sain. I've seen obviously some for CJ. Julian Sain, Trinidad Chambliss, CJ or Sain. Let's see here. Trinidad Chambliss, Arch Manning, Dante Moore, Darian Mensah. I mean, somebody just said Jade Maeva. You're not going to be shocked at who came up with that one. But it's our West Coast guy. But there's a lot of good options. That's the whole point. And so there is no wrong answer in a preseason prediction at quarterback if you're picking within a group of 6 or 7 guys. Like if a Miami fan wants to jump like, it's Darian Mensah, I'm like, okay, I can see why you would think that. And it could end up being the case. You look at what he did last year. So That's what's partly why I'm so much looking forward to this college football season, Trevor. So we think it's CJ Carr. There's a lot of names you could give where I'm like, did this guy seriously just say such and such? Like, do you watch college football? You know what I mean? Like, how could you go with that guy? You'd have to go down a pretty long list or just come out of left field with some craziness for me to say that, because it's such a good year and a deep. I mean, if somebody wanted to say, I really think Damon Williams is going to be that guy. Okay. I don't agree, but like, I can definitely see why you would think that. Look at the numbers he put up last year. He's going to have some big game opportunities to show that. There's a lot of names that you could go with here that I'd say, yeah, okay. I go with CJ, but I understand why you feel that way. And again, that's why I'm so looking forward to this season, because I think quarterback play around the country, and we didn't even mention Drew Mestemaker, who may lead the nation in passing yards this year.
Honestly,
there's so many good quarterbacks that and I guess maybe that's the former quarterback in me, but when college football has a lot of good quarterbacks, it just makes a lot more fun for me to follow the sport. But I also think it raises the brand of football. Because how many teams have we seen in recent years like, boy, that team would be really good if they could just have a quarterback? You know, man, how good would that Michigan team have been in 2024 if they didn't have Davis Warren at quarterback? You know, you and I talked about this with Stanford last year. If they had a competent quarterback, like, they're a bowl team.
Yeah, I said it earlier this offseason. If Bear Bachmeier didn't transfer, my outlook on Stanford is completely different than what it is right now.
Yes. I mean, pick a year for Iowa over the last 15 years. And it's, if they had a good quarterback, what would they be? You know, you look at Illinois in the last few years. When they've had a good quarterback, pretty good. When they haven't had a good quarterback, so many years where you're like, man, this team would be pretty good. Rutgers had a team like that last couple of years where it's like, dude, if they had a competent quarterback, this team might be pretty good.
Yeah.
And now it's like you're looking at a year where it's like, man, this is a deep year at quarterback. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this season.
As am I. It's going to be great. It's why there's a bigger sample size, too, of teams that we believe can win a national title. A lot of the quarterbacks that you mentioned can be found at Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Miami, Indiana. It's going to be fun to watch. Let's talk about the top running back. Brian, who in all of college football do you believe will end the 26th season as the nation's top running back?
This one was tough because I know who your pick is. Actually, you know what? Can you do this one first? Because I need to talk about your pick to set up where I'm going with mine, and I don't want to steal your thunder. So how about you kick it off with who your top running back is?
Yeah. This was close. There was a lot of players in contention. Thought about Jaden Baugh. I wish I knew more about Ahmed Hardy, but I just wish he just comes back healthy as a person, not just as a.
So yeah.
Right. And so he would have been in that conversation with me if it wasn't for that shooting at the concert that he went to. But I ended up landing on Kejuan Lacey at Ole Miss. I thought he was exceptional last year. 24 rushing touchdowns, 1,567 rushing yards, added 177 yards on the ground. But and I understand all of the concerns. You know, I've seen it in the chat. Lane Kiffin's gone. Charlie Weiss Jr. is gone. But I think at some point when I look at backfields and I look at a backfield that still returns Trinidad Chambliss and Quan Lacey, I still think it's going to be a very premier backfield in the SEC, one of the best in the country. So I ended up landing on Kejuan Lacey, but there are a lot of candidates on this one, very similar to quarterback.
I think Kejuan Lacey's, I would say, is probably the most talented veteran back in the country this year. And he's the best returning back in college football this year. Here's my big issue, though. I just don't like the offensive line he's running behind this year. That's my concern.
Sure.
And part of being the best back is you do have to produce. Based on last year, he produced. He can be that guy. I have major concerns about that. And if the offensive lines at Ole Miss can just be solid, your pick will be, in my opinion, probably the pick. I have concerns about that. It's a schematic change. How will they use him? That's a concern as well. But with my O-line issues being discussed, I'm not going with Kejuan Lacey. And as you mentioned, there's so many good options. I mean, we've seen Bo Jackson be talked about. We've seen Raleek Brown get talked about in the chat. Justice Haynes is an absolute dude. My issue with Justice Haynes is the same that I have for Kejuan Lacey. I don't love that offensive line. You could go with Jaden Ball. I've seen Jaden Ball get brought up. I think he's going to have a good year. Mark Fletcher is a name to go with. There's a lot of good backs in college football this year. The guy that I'm going with, though, I'm going in the ACC. I'm going with Isaac Brown. I think Isaac Brown, you picked him as he's one of your top guys in the ACC when we did our ACC breakdown, Trev. I look at the schedule. They're going to need him to be that guy. I think he was underrated last year, a little banged up. They threw the ball. Their throwing game just wasn't as good last year, or their running game wasn't as good last year because people were like, I dare you to throw with Miller Moss. I dare you to throw the football. We're not going to let Isaac Brown beat us. And he still put up numbers. I mean, when you look at what he did last year, Trev, with defenses trying to kind of focus on stopping him last year, he still averaged 8.8 yards per carry on 101 carries. He barely averaged 10 yards a carry. Averaged 98 yards on only 11 yards a carry. I think the offensive line has got to come together, but I like the makeup of the offensive line. You and I have talked about that. I think you look at the teams they play, he's going to put up big-time numbers. He's a dynamic back. He's been really good the last 2 years. He's supposedly kind of still working back to health. He's been a little bit dinged up, I believe, in fall camp, but I think he's going to be healthy when the season starts. And they do have good depth. Kewan Brown came back. I just think he's going to be a big-time weapon. I think he's going to be 150 carries, 7.5 to 8 yards a carry, and just put up big-time numbers and make plays out of the backfield. I'm going with Isaac Brown, but it's probably the pick I feel least secure about just because of his own injury history, but then also it's just a deep year at running back. There's a lot of different directions that we could go with this one, but I'm going to go with Isaac Brown from Louisville.
Running back is also the position that I feel the least confident in. It's for the offensive line issues that you mentioned at Ole Miss. It's what doesn't give me a ton of vote of confidence in that one, but it is a loaded year. Wide receiver, however, this one did not take much thought in this one. We both went with Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State.
Honestly, if you'd have gone with somebody else, I'd have been like, all right, Trev, you're trying too hard. You know what I mean? Like, I understand where you're going. But he's the best. He'll produce, and he's the most talented receiver in college football.
Yeah.
And this isn't narrative. It's easy to like when everybody jumped on the Maserati Marv bandwagon, like, he was very good. I don't know that I believe the hype. Maybe it's because we watched Benjamin Morrison lock him down 2 years in a row. Maybe that's why. But this one to me is a no-brainer. With all due respect to Malachi Toney and Cam Coleman, and there's a lot of great receivers in college football. This is a different animal. Just like there's a lot of really good corners in college football. There's nobody on Leonard Moore's level. 100%. There's a lot of really good receivers in college football. There's nobody on Jeremiah Smith's level. No. He might be the best player in college football. He's certainly in the conversation. Just any position. Yeah. And that's why he's my number one.
Let's talk about tight end, because I echo everything that you said about Jeremiah Smith. I don't want to sound like a broken record. So let's move on to tight end. This one, a little bit wide open for kind of you could argue, a little bit different reason why quarterback was difficult to pick and running back was hard to pick. I think that there are viable choices here, but there was no clear-cut, like, yeah, that guy's a dude at tight end. I think there's a lot of projection needed at some positions at tight end. Some injuries played a factor here. Transfers play a factor here. Who did you end up going with at tight end?
This one was Jamari Johnson from Oregon. Couple reasons why. Number one, I think he's talented. This isn't about who the best draft prospect is. This isn't about who's going to put up the most yards. This is a guy that I just think is just going to be the most effective and the most productive player, especially in some big moments. And Jamari Johnson's that guy for me. I mean, last year, Trev, he had 32 catches for 510 yards. 15.9 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns last year, and he wasn't even their top tight end. This is a team that likes to throw to the tight end. Their top 2 tight ends last year combined for 83 catches. The year before that, Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq combined for 67 catches, plus you had another 10 from Patrick Herbert. So this is a team that likes to throw to the tight ends. They will have a second tight end play, but he will be their big dog. He's going to put up big numbers. And I like the fact that he played well in some big moments last season too, Trev. He's a very intriguing player, can work the middle of the field, can work the short areas. He can stretch the field. He last year made plays on seam routes and over-the-top routes. He caught a touchdown pass. I think it was against Penn State where he caught a shovel pass and got hit at the 3 and just kind of bulldozed his way into the end zone. Maybe it was a 2-point conversion. I can't remember the specific. I think it was Penn State. but got into the end zone with that. I mean, he had the last 2 games of the year against Texas Tech and Indiana, he had 8 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown in the last 2 games as well. So you saw a stretch last year where starts the season off with no catches, then he has 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. He steps into the lineup when Kenyon Sadiq got hurt, and then it's 4, 4, 3, 3, 1, 4, 4, much more productive. And that was with him splitting attempts with Kenyon Sadiq, who was a first-round draft pick. He becomes the guy in that offense this year. I think the receiving core is going to be even better this year, which is going to take some of the pressure off of him, and that's why I have him as my top tight end.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I think he's due for a big year. I'm with you. I'm going with Terrence Carter Jr. at Texas Tech. If you want the definition of consistency at the tight end spot, he's kind of that guy. I mean, last year, all encompassing, he had 55 receptions, 624 yards, 5 touchdowns, averaged 11.3 yards per catch. He was second on the team in overall receptions. And he was very, very, very consistent. And some of his best performances came on the road. On the road against the ranked Utah team, 7 for 49 and a touchdown. On the road against Kansas State, 4 for 81. On the road against West Virginia, 10 for 98. Then in the playoffs against Oregon, they did not lose because of Terrence Carter. He had 9 catches for 72 yards. I think he's probably one of the best tight ends in the Big 12. I'm be very curious to see what Walker Lyons does at BYU. He was a name that I thought about, but I needed a lot of projection to get there to be the top tight end in all of college football. So I didn't go that route, but I really like Terrence Carter. One of the most experienced returning tight ends in college football. He was at, I believe he was at Louisiana in 2024, but he was productive with them as well. Became more efficient as far as scoring touchdowns with Texas Tech the following year. So I'm going with Terrence Carter. I think he's going to be due for a big season, and he can kind of be the safety valve for Will Hammond in Texas Tech's offense. I like their receiving core, but you guys know I'm a big fan of Kenny Johnson. I like a lot of the other portal pickups they picked up: Dante Lee, Jalen Jones, Malcolm Simmons, and then what you can get from Micah Hudson. But with all those moving pieces, I think that Terrence Carter Jr. kind of gives you that safety valve, that all reliable. I think he's going to turn some heads this year. But again, to your point, it's not about projecting like what they're going to be in the NFL.
Right. Which is why we didn't go with Trey Green. I get that he's the top tight end draft target and he's a freaky athlete, but and he is going to play in a system that should be more tight end friendly. So I did consider him, but I just think those guys are just going to be a step more productive and overall impactful. But he's probably the number 1 draft prospect at tight end. But just because you're the number 1 draft prospect doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best tight end in college football. Right. So that's it's going to be a good tight end year as well. Some quality tight ends that we could have looked at. Especially there's some G5 guys that transferred up that I'm also very intrigued by this year. It's going to be a fun year.
Let's talk individual offensive linemen, Brian. And you and I we had the same thought process with this one, choosing our top offensive linemen. And it was actually 2 guys that we ended up talking about yesterday in the Big Ten preview. Who is your top lineman in 2026? Offensive lineman.
I went with Trevor Lauk from Iowa. I just think he's the most steady. He's also a dominant player. And I'm also projecting a little bit because when you think of some of the other top linemen, you think of Caden Green in Missouri, who I had as my top lineman in the SEC. You think of Trevor Gooseby, who a lot of people are very high on. He's probably the top-rated draft pick. You look at Carter Smith, who's a heck of a player at Indiana. I think he was at least consensus All-American last year. He might have been unanimous, but he was at least consensus. I'm not quite sure if he was unanimous or not. But he was a consensus All-American. He comes back. There's some really good interior players. There's the Notre Dame guys that we've talked about. There's a lot of really good options, but Trevor Lauk's a 1-year starter, and he was really good last year. I would argue he was their best lineman. I made that case yesterday. I understand Jennings Dunker's the guy that got all the pub, and I just felt Trevor Lauk was their best lineman last year on a team that won the Joe Moore Award, and that was in his first year as a starter. Now he comes back. He's in year 2. He's going to be stronger. He's more experienced. He's going to be part of another good offensive line. The coaching is going to be great. I think he's going to be a dominant football player. If you say, hey, you could bring anybody, you can draft a starting offensive line and you can take anybody that doesn't play at Notre Dame. Who would you take? I'm taking Trevor Lauk and I'm planting him right there at left tackle and we're going to build around him.
He also has a great name, if I do say so myself, but I'm a little biased. First name, Lauk is pretty cool too, I suppose. Yeah. I'm also going the same route that I went yesterday. I'm going with Carter Smith out of
No
Indiana.
bias. No
No,
bias from Trevor.
no bias from Trevor for Trevor Lauk. But I'm going with Carter Smith, left tackle for Indiana. I mean, he played 483 pass blocking snaps last year. Only allowed 9 total pressures all year. Went what 15 games in a row last year without allowing a single hit or sack on the quarterback. And then the only game that he allowed a sack in was against Miami, which, as we know, that defensive line was built a little bit different.
They're decent.
I can't say anything about tackles allowing sacks against Miami to be a demerit against Carter Smith after watching what Notre Dame did on the season opener last year. But in all seriousness, I think he's going to anchor that offensive line, and he has one of the best coaches in the business to help him get there in Bob Bostad. So I'm going with Carter Smith. I think he's going to turn a lot of heads. I don't know if he's going to be the potentially top 10 first round NFL draft pick that people have him projected to be, just because I think there's some questions around it. But I do think
I don't
he's
know
going to
that
be a really
NFL
good.
thinks he's even a tackle.
Yeah.
I saw Dane Brugler had him as a guard behind Anthony Knapp. I don't, look, here's my thing on Carter Smith on the NFL. This has nothing to do with your prediction or him as a college football player, because I know we agree on this. If he was going to be a top 10 to 15 NFL draft pick, he would have gone last year.
Correct.
You're coming off a national title season. I don't know if you looked it up, if he was consensus or unanimous All-American last year. Heck of a player. But I just think, and you're making this case, he is what he is. But what he was last year was outstanding. You know what I mean? Like he's already really, really good. And so, but like, I just think he is what he is. I think guys like Caden Green, Trevor Gooseby, even to a degree, but especially Trevor Lauk, are guys where they're just scratching the surface, and then their breakouts kind of put them ahead of him. But like, he is what he is.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's another level for Carter Smith to get to, which means everybody else has to catch him. Because if we were going off of what they did last season, Trevor, you and I have the same offensive lineman.
Yeah.
I have to go to projection of Trevor Lauk or Caden Green to have them over Carter Smith. That's just where I'm going. So I think Carter Smith is a sound pick as well. But my comment was more about this notion of him being a top 10 to 15 NFL draft pick, which we've seen in mock drafts. I'll be shocked if that's the case.
Same.
Because I just feel like if the NFL thought that about him, he's not coming back for a 5th season.
Exactly. I'm with you completely on that one. Let's switch gears. Let's talk defensive side of the ball. Who do you have as the top defensive end in college football this year?
This one, I'm confident in my pick, although I think there's a lot of great options. Anthony Smith from Minnesota is a great option. Dylan Stewart's a great option. There's Cleve Lubin would be a great option, but I'm still going Colin Simmons. I think he's an elite talent. He's been an impact player really from the day he arrived at Texas, even just as a rotation guy. Earlier in his career, he's just what was it, 2024? He wasn't a starter, but he comes off the bench. He has 14 tackles for loss, 9 sacks in 16 games as a true freshman last year. Despite getting a lot of the defense's attention, he has 15 and a half tackles for loss, 12 sacks. 3 forced fumbles. That's a big thing for me too. And in 2 years, Trev, he's had 6 forced fumbles in 2 years. That's a very underrated part of being a great sack artist, is can you get the ball out?
Yeah.
And I just look, there's a lot of great DNs, and if somebody wants to go with Dylan Stewart, I'm not going to be like, dude, you're out of your mind. I just think it's pretty clear. There's a lot of great ones, but I think Colin Simmons is the best. And I think he's got to improve his run defense as a true sophomore. Shocker, he's not a complete player as a true sophomore. Go figure. Who knew? But that's one area where I do want to see him improve his game. But that's also true for Dylan Stewart and Cleve Lubin and a lot of other guys. But I look at Colin Simmons, I still think he was a pretty good run defender. I just think there's another level for him to get to now that he's a junior and he's a year stronger. But he's just the best defensive end in college football to me, all around player. He's not like that's kind of my knock on Damon Wilson. You and I have talked about this. He's kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah,
he's a pass rusher. He's a one-way guy. That's what Boubacar was in 2024. That's what we talked about. He's got to become a better run defender. The thing I like about a lot of these young ends is they're two-way players. I think he'll improve as a run defender this year even more, and that's going to make him even more dominant. And I think the emergence of Lance Jackson who's a young player that had a nice freshman season, if Lance has the improvement that I think he's going to have opposite Colin, that's going to make him even more effective, because it's like you can't double him or you're going to have to worry about Lance or he or Canu or somebody else really making plays on him.
Yeah, I'm with you there completely. It's very similar to, I also have Colin Simmons. It's very similar to the conversation we just had about Carter Smith. I think that some of the other top defensive ends in the country are trying to rise to the level that Colin Simmons is at. Dylan Stewart included, about being an all-around player. Damon Wilson, it's about improving your run game. Boubacar, it's having those numbers that Colin Simmons produces. So it's all of those
Same
players.
with Clev. You know, the only guy that has the numbers that he has is Anthony Smith.
Yep.
And with all due respect, I love Anthony Smith. I ranked him as my best defensive lineman in the Big Ten. But if I had to pick a starting lineup and I get the first draft pick at end, love Anthony Smith, I'm taking Colin Simmons. Now, if I got the number 2 pick and you took Colin Simmons, I'd have no problem taking Anthony Smith as my number 1 pick. But that's only because Colin Simmons isn't on the board anymore.
Right.
You know, and this is for college football, not so much for NFL draft, because Dylan Stewart's a better NFL draft prospect than Anthony Smith. We're talking about just best player in college football.
Agreed.
But and here's the difference between Colin Simmons and Carter Smith, because you and I agreed on this. Carter Smith is what he is. He is the best returning lineman in college football. Guys are trying to chase him. The difference with Colin Simmons is Carter's here, and now you got to catch him. Colin is here, you're trying to catch him, and he's still getting better.
Yeah, very true.
You know what I mean? And it's going to make him even harder to catch him, in my opinion, because I don't think he's played his best football yet. I think there's another level of consistency that a lot of young players have, especially young linemen, that is still learning from. So he's a dude. And Indy Moore is right. He talked about Kenyatta Jackson, Princewell. I'm not going to pronounce his name. And the kid from OU, that's not even their best end. Taylor Ween is their best end. Mateo Uyunglele at Oregon. There's a lot of great ends in college football this year. Clev Lubin is a big-time end. And, of course, Notre Dame's got a couple. It's going to be it's going to be a really fun year. The kid from North Carolina that nobody talks about that put up really good numbers last year. Will Helt at Clemson. We have Jaheim Lawson as a potential break. That's why I'm so excited about this season. You know, partly why Trevor and I are so high on college football this year. A lot of great lines, a lot of talented quarterbacks. What are the premium positions in college football? Quarterback, left tackle, D end, right, corner. Those positions are loaded in college football this year. Loaded.
Yeah.
And that's a big reason why we're excited about this season. But it's also why Notre Dame better make sure Gerby Lambert and Will Black are up to par, because when they get into the postseason and they're going against some of these defensive ends, you better bring your A game, baby. But the good news is other teams better bring their A game too, because of what Notre Dame should be able to have at the defensive end position. But, man, that's part of the reason I'm so excited about this season. There's so many great players at premium positions.
Let's kick it to the interior of the defensive line, Brian. Who is your top defensive tackle this year?
Yeah, I was back. I initially had Amari Washington as my pick. I initially went with him. I thought about going with David Stone at Oklahoma. I think he's going to have a really big year. I went back and forth, but when I settled in on it, I said, okay, who, in my opinion, is going to be the best all-around D tackle? And I went with Ahmad Moten at Miami. I think there's just another. He was really good last year, 9 tackles for loss as an interior player. When he was on his game, he was a beast. Trev, you could actually point to games last year where you could make a case. There were several games last year that I would argue, I think Ahmed Moten was their best defensive lineman in that game.
Sure.
Not the whole season, just in particular games. He was an absolute force at times last season, and I think that continues this year. Now, obviously, they've got to have some improvements at end, but I just think he's going to take a big jump this year. You know, he's a fifth-year guy. He's seen his snaps increase. He went from 293 and 24 to over 400 last year. And, 27 tackles, 27 pressures last year, 19 run stops, and only 216 run snaps. I think Ahmed Moten becomes a much bigger force this year. If he can just be a more consistent player, I think he emerges as the best all-around D tackle. I put a lot of value in that. There are better guys there are better pass rushers in the country than Ahmed Moten at D tackle. I think there are better run stoppers in college football at D tackle. If he plays consistent football, and that's why this is a projection, if he plays consistent football, I don't know that there's a better all-around D tackle in college football than Ahmed Bowden.
I think that's fair. I also look to Miami. I also look to their interior, and I'm going with Justin Scott. He started to come on towards the end of the year. There's still levels of things that he has to work out in terms of his consistency, but I really like the defensive tackle that he turned into as the season progressed. He finished the year with 19 total pressures. 17 of those came from Syracuse on. Finished the year with 22 run stops. 19 of those came from Syracuse on. He really started to turn it on as the year went along, and I see him putting it all together this year, and he's going to benefit, to your point, of playing alongside Ahmed Moten. So they pose a really nasty 1-2 punch of what they're going to be able to do to interior offensive lines. That's why the matchup against Notre Dame on November 7th is going to be absolutely huge. But I thought about Ahmed Moten, a couple of guys I thought of. Amari Washington was one of those guys as well, but I ended up landing on Justin Scott for the improvement that he made from basically week 11 in the regular season throughout the playoffs. I think that carries over into this year.
AJ Holmes is another one that I considered
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, there's some good D tackles out there. Really good D tackles out there.
Let's kick it back a level in the defense. Talk about linebackers. Again, loaded year, I believe, in college football at linebacker. A lot of candidates for this one. Who's your top linebacker in college football?
I went Sammy Brown from Clemson. I think he flew under the radar last year, Trev. Because Clemson had such a disappointing season, I don't think people were talking about Sammy Brown as much as they should have been talking about Sammy Brown. We're talking about a kid that in 13 games last year had 106 tackles, including 51 solo. So he wasn't like, 39 solo tackles and like 70 assisted tackles. He had 13 and a half tackles for loss. Right. So, hey, clearly a good run defender. But he also had 5 sacks, 5 pass breakups, and an interception last year. I think he's a good all-around player. He's an explosive athlete, Trev. Explosive athlete. Big, physical, fast, can fly around the field. And as I said, as a true sophomore last year, had over 100 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and finished the year on a very, very high note. He had 7 tackles for loss in the last 5 games of the year. So his game continued to elevate as the year went on. He got better and better. I mean, and he showed himself to be pretty good in the opener. He had 11 tackles and a tackle for loss in the game against LSU. But you're just talking about a kid that last year showed he can stop the run, he can defend the pass, he can rush the passer. And he's an elite athlete, in my opinion. So I'm going, and now and he did all that with a very inconsistent defensive line in front of him. I think the fact that they don't have the stars on the inside, but they've got guys that are just going to be grinders more this year, I think that's going to be huge for Sammy Brown. And he was learning a brand new defense last year as a true sophomore. Now he goes into year 2, and a lot of the things we talk about why we think Drake and Kingston and Jaden are going to be better in year 2, same thing is true for Sammy Brown, except that he's starting from a point where he already had 100 tackles, 13 and a half tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 5 pass breakups, and a pick. So I think Sammy Brown's going to be an absolute beast this year. Trev, a lot of great options, but Ben Roberts, we've talked a lot about this offseason. I know your pick, who I won't say. There's a lot of great options here. I just think Sammy Brown's the most dynamic linebacker in college football and the best all-around player at linebacker in college football.
I get it. He's a dude. If Tom Allen's defense is going to take a jump in year 2, Sammy Brown's going to have to kind of be at the nucleus of that happening. I'm going with my guy, Xavier Atkins at Auburn. I'm a big believer in the Auburn turnaround and what Alex Golesh is going to do. We talked about it yesterday when we were previewing the SEC. I had him as my top defender overall in the SEC. I love that he comes back with DJ Durkin, and he is extremely, extremely productive. He had 84 total tackles last year, 9 sacks, 17 tackles for a loss, 2 forced fumbles. I don't know what all he's going to be able to provide as far as pass defense goes, but he's just going to be a guy that just racks up tackles. I mean, like it's his job because it is his job. But on the road against A&M last year, he had 10 tackles. At home against Missouri last year, he had 11. Home against Arkansas, he had 13. He had 7 tackles, and he had 7 tackles on the road against Oklahoma in a loss. Like, he's a very productive player. Sack and a half last year in the Iron Bowl against Alabama. I'm a big fan of Xavier Atkins, and I think that he's going to turn some heads this year, heads that he hasn't already.
I want to point something out about Xavier Atkins as well, Trevor. He had 84 tackles last year. I'm sorry, their stat people at Auburn screwed him out of being more productive last year. He had 6 solo tackles and only 24 assisted tackles. You and I have watched Xavier Atkins on film. I promise you had more than 24 assisted tackles last year.
100%.
Like, if he was on the Old Dominion plan of how to schedule tackle stats, he'd had 235. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
he's just around the ball so much. I saw that and I was like, 84 tackles. Like, did I watch all 6 games where those 84 tackles were made? I mean, Trev, you gave us tackle numbers. I'll give you some tackle numbers. 10, 9, 7, 6, 6, 5, 5. Those are solo tackles numbers. So, like, the game against Missouri, we had 11 tackles. He had 10 of those were solo tackles. You know what I mean? Like, the 13 against Arkansas, 9 were solo tackles. So, yeah, he's a big-time player. I want to see him be a little bit more productive in the pass game.
Agreed.
In coverage. That's where his lack of length kind of hurts him a little bit, and that's kind of what separated, him and Sammy Brown for me. But when you talk about just see ball, get ball, there aren't a whole lot of guys in college football that are in the same level as Xavier Atkins. And like Sammy Brown, he's going into year 2 of that defensive system this year, and I think they're gonna be a little bit of just a better coached, just all around better team, and that's going to help him put up some big numbers this year. Big numbers. He's fun to watch. And he's 6 foot, 210 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, he's as big as a Don Schuler on paper. I mean, that's the thing. And that dude is fun to watch, man. I love watching that kid play. I really do.
He's so fun. I'm with you completely. Let's talk about corner, Brian. Very similar to wide receiver. This took virtually zero thought, but we both went with Leonard Moore here on this one.
Yeah, I actually spent a couple minutes just like, okay, is that, Ellis Robinson there's just nobody on his level. There isn't. And so I even was like, let me not be lazy about this, and let me just do my due diligence, because I did that at receiver as well, and I did it for several minutes, and I'm like, guys, this is just, it's not close. It's not close. Someone surpassing him at cornerback is going to require someone to have a major step up, and it's going to require Leonard Moore to regress.
Agreed.
I just think he's the best cornerback in college football. I would argue that the gap between him and the next corner is greater than the gap between Jeremiah Smith and the next receiver.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, you look at Malachi Toney and Cam Coleman and guys like that. Like, there's guys that I think aren't Jeremiah, but they're in the conversation. I don't know that there's someone, with all due respect to Ellis Robinson and guys like that, there's nobody, Brandon Finney, and there's nobody that's in the conversation with him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Leonard Moore was mine. Let's talk about safety, Brian. Who is your number one safety in college football this year?
Yeah, I was back and forth on this one as well. You got the Alabama kids are really good. Obviously, Notre Dame has a couple really good safeties. Oregon has a couple really good safeties. There's a lot of good safeties in college football this year, but I'm going KJ Bolden. I don't know that I would say KJ's the best returning safety in college football, but I'm projecting here a little bit with the improvement that we're seeing from them at corner, with, I think, the improvement we're going to see from the defensive line, with an offense that can score more points. I'm going with KJ Bolden. I think his two-way ability, plus KJ's now going to be a junior. I put a lot into that third year, like that junior year surge. I think that's when guys really get to the point where the elite players get to their peak, is that junior year. So when I look at Leonard Moore, I look at Colin Simmons, I look at KJ Bolden, I look at Breontae Johnson, we look at guys like that, that third year tends to be that year. And I think that's what we're going to see from KJ. I think he's going to really take his game to another level this year and emerge as the top safety in a year where there's a lot of, just in his own league, there's a lot of really good safeties just in the SEC. I think, and then there's some really good ones up north. Obviously, we've talked about Notre Dame's got a couple darn good ones. Georgia, his team found out. I mean, look, the best safety on the field when these two teams played 2 years ago was not KJ Bolden. It was not Dan Jackson. It was not Xavier Watts. It was a Don Schuler with some of the plays he made in that game. Xavier made some big ones too. Just think about him putting his helmet on, Don putting his helmet on, running back's head, knocking that ball out. But I think KJ's game is really going to elevate this year, and I think he's going to emerge as the best all-around safety in college football.
I was close with him. I came down to 2. and I ended up going with Bryante Johnson. But the other safety for me in contention was KJ Bolden. Here was this true separator for me. The only thing that I got hung up with, because I do think KJ Bolden is one of the best returning safeties in college football. I just don't know if their defensive line is going to have some of the success to warrant KJ Bolden reaching his true full potential versus where I have a lot more confidence that Notre Dame's defensive line will do that for Notre Dame's secondary. I think Bryante going into his third year, he's also going to be a junior, year 2 of the Chris Ash system. He's not going to have to work himself into, okay, he only played 9 snaps, but then he wasn't a starter for Texas A&M, but then still played 56 snaps. Then he was a starter for Purdue because of the targeting call, and then he just held on to the job. Now it's, hey, all offseason he's the starter. He's the guy. He knows he's the one starting next to a Don Schuler. So I think he's going to have an absolutely massive season this year. But those were the 2 safeties that I came down to. I was very close with KJ Bolden. Very close.
It's going to be a fun year at safety. There's some really good players that position. The thing for me with Bryante is I just got to see that he can stay healthy.
Sure.
He's literally been hurt both of his 2 years in Notre Dame. Now, one of it was his coming back from the injury he had in high school. But he's got to show me he can stay healthy. If he stays healthy, I could see that happening.
Very fair.
See that happening. Yep.
We got a couple of kind of big picture superlatives here and where we're going to start. We're going to talk about freshman of the year in college football. And we are going with, like Brian explained before, the true definition of a freshman is your first year in college football. We're not talking redshirt freshman because that's not a thing anymore. So, Brian, when you look at the landscape of college football, who is your top freshman of the year in college football?
Well, my answer has kind of changed over the last couple of days. Just kind of looking around the game. There's a lot of freshmen that I looked at that I think could have big years. But when they named Faison Brandon as a starting quarterback at Tennessee, that became my immediate pick.
Yep.
There's a lot of good options, Trev. A lot of good options. I thought about even Amari Latimer, who I've talked about at West Virginia, who I could see having a big year in Rich Rod's offense. But look, Faison Brandon's going to a system where he's a playmaking talent. He is going to a system where quarterbacks just produce. It's just the reality of it. If you can't produce in this system, you are playing the wrong position. Yeah. You just are, Trev. You know what I mean? This is just a very quarterback-friendly system. Heck, it's a system that even Joe Milton threw for 2,800 yards and 20 touchdowns and 5 picks. You know what I'm saying? And Nico, I could lead a team to the playoff in this system. You know what I mean? It's a very quarterback-friendly system. And he's a run-throw playmaker. I think he's a passer, but he's also like Hendon Hooker. He can hurt you with his legs still, though. He's a drop-back quarterback that's athletic enough to still hurt you with his legs in a big, big way. But he also has a great supporting cast. I think their offensive line is going to be much improved with David Sanders moving left, Wendell Moe, Sam Pendleton. I love their receiving core. They've got one of the better 1-2 punches in the college football that nobody's really talking about. I like this offense, man. I like what's around him, and I think he's going to put up really big numbers. I just don't know that anyone's going to be able to come close to just the production you're going to have. Maybe it won't look that way in September right away because they have actually a pretty tough September schedule in a couple of those games. But by the time we get to October, November, I think Faison Brandon's going to be just a clear best freshman in college football.
Faison Brandon is also my pick. The landscape has changed over the last couple days, but I think he is going to have a lot of success in Knoxville this year with all the supporting cast coming back around him. It's not going to take long for him to get some traction in that offense. I'm very confident in saying that, so I'm with you there. Another thing we also know about this day and age of college football is the transfer portal is alive, well, and prevalent, and there's going to be a lot of transfers that I think are going to make their impact felt. So we took a look at who we believe is going to be the top transfer in college football this year. I ended up going with Cam Coleman from Texas. I think that his presence sets the Texas offense up to reach a higher level than last year when they were relying on Ryan Wingo to just be that number one guy. I don't think he's going to put up the numbers that Jeremiah Smith will. I do think athletically he is one of the very few receivers in college football that can match Jeremiah Smith or come close, maybe not match, but come close to his level of athleticism. But I think that gives Arch Manning a true certified number one weapon in the boundary, and it's going to allow guys like Emmett Mosley, Dalen McCutcheon, and then especially Ryan Wingo kind of feast on his presence. It's very similar to what we talked about what Malachi Fields was able to do on the field last year when Jaden Greathouse was also on the field. So I'm going with Cam Coleman as my top transfer in college football, but there are so many options that you could go with here.
Trev, I really tried to think of somebody else, and I just couldn't. In this state, there's so many transfers to choose from, but I look at the production Cam Coleman had last year at Auburn. First of all, you nailed it. He's an elite talent. I mean, he's a special talent. He's tall, he's fast, he's athletic. You look at the production last year as a true sophomore, 56 catches, 708 yards, 5 touchdowns. Not going to blow you away. Had 37 catches for 598 yards and 8 touchdowns as a freshman. But he did that with some of the worst quarterback play in college football. I mean, he had Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels as his quarterbacks. Last year, Auburn threw a combined 11 touchdown passes. They averaged 197 yards per game passing last year. Like, this was not a good offensive football team. And it was definitely not a good passing football team. And now he's going to a system that is geared towards throwing the football. And he's going to play for one of the better quarterbacks in college football, who has no problem throwing it up and let him go make plays. And you can't, it's harder to game plan to take him out because you still have to deal with Ryan Wingo, you still have to deal with Emmett Mosley, you still have to deal with Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers out of the backfield as pass catchers on top of their ability as runners. So I really like Cam Coleman. I tried hard to think of somebody else, and there's a lot of great options, but I've got to go with Cam Coleman here. I think he's going to emerge as the clear number 2 receiver in college football this year. And he'll be that guy that we're going to be like if it wasn't for Jeremiah Smith, we'd be talking a lot more about this kid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He's already starting to garner a lot of attention. He is one of the most consistent other first-team preseason All-Americans at wide receiver alongside Jeremiah Smith. I think he's due for a really big year. Let's talk about the most outstanding player on offense. We're going to do the same for defense. We're going to start with offense, and this is very similar to what we talked about when we were breaking down Notre Dame. It's most dominant, biggest impact, combination of production, big game performance. Brian, who is your most outstanding player on offense in college football this year?
It really just comes down to who's the best. And when I look at it, there will be contenders. This is not a no-brainer. It's not a no-brainer the way it is with this player at his position, but I'm going Jeremiah Smith. I still think he's the best player in college football this season, certainly offensive player in college football. There's a debate if he's the best overall, just like there's a debate, is it C.J. Carr, is it Leonard Moore, is it Colin Simmons, is it Dylan Stewart, is it, there's a debate to be had. But I still go Jeremiah Smith. And honestly, when I look at last year, he was productive last year, Trev, but I'm just going to be honest with you. I think he got held back at Ohio State. He had 87 catches, 1,243 yards, and 12 touchdowns, and I think he got held back. I do. First of all, he didn't play against Rutgers. And just the way that they ran the offense, I just felt like, dude, this guy should be doing even more. And I think this year we're going to see that from Arthur Smith, especially if Ohio State does some of the things I think they're going to do, which is instill a little bit more of a pro-style approach with maybe some under center, some play action. There's going to be some plays where if you want to try to stop Bo Jackson, you're going to have to get off that action pass and out of 12 personnel, come downhill, and next thing you know, Jeremiah Smith is running over top of the defense. So I just think he's going to have a monster year this year.
Yeah, a lot of players in contention for this one. I leaned heavily into the overall impact piece, and I went with Trinidad Chambliss. He showed me a lot last year in the postseason. If I'm wrong on him, it's what a lot of people have discussed in the chat already so far. Doesn't have Lane Kiffin anymore, doesn't have Charlie Wise Jr. anymore, which is a major concern. But when I look at the overall impact from him and the plays that I know that he's able to make, the off-script plays, I don't know if when you're that instinctive and that talented of a football player, I don't know if it matters who your offensive coordinator is when you're making 3 guys miss in the backfield. That was not Charlie Weiss Jr. on the field making those 3 Georgia defensive linemen miss. That was just his God-given ability. I think if you take Trinidad Chambliss off that team, they're not bowl eligible. He's going to be the only reason why they're going to have any remotely close sort of success this year, along with Kejuan Lacey. But I'm going with Trinidad. If I'm wrong, it's going to be because I think that losing out on Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. is just an absolutely way too big of a factor that doesn't even allow him to be a playmaker. But the 2 I came down to were Jeremiah Smith and Trinidad. I think there's going to be great great quarterback play across college football, but I think he's going to put together some of the biggest highlight reel plays, making people miss in the backfield. I see him having like a Jaden Daniels type of season. Not saying he's going to win the Heisman and set a program record in anything, but it's going to be one of those. If you took Jaden Daniels off that LSU 23 team, they might not be bowl eligible. I feel the same about Trinidad. So that's where I landed on with that one. What about defense, Brian? Who do you have as the top most outstanding player on defense?
There's more debate here. There's Colin Simmons at Texas. There's, we talk KJ Bolden. There's Sammy Brown, Xavier Watkins, Dylan Stewart, Clev Lubin, Anthony Smith. There's a long conversation, but I think the best defensive player in college football is Leonard Moore. I mean, you talk about a guy that's able to completely take over games, a guy that has really played very well in some of the biggest games. I think the only game that I would say he didn't play well that was a big game was probably against Miami last year, where the whole defense looked lost at times. He was great against Texas A&M, and he was great in the playoffs year before. And other than a third down where there was a bit of a push-off, Jeremiah Smith didn't do anything against Leonard Moore. And Jeremiah Smith has said, who's the best corner you've ever gone against? And he only played when Leonard was a freshman. He said Leonard Moore from Notre Dame. I think he's not only the best cornerback in college football, I think he's the best defensive player in college football. Is it a no-brainer? No, because there's some studs. And a lot of them are in the same class. A lot of them are from the 24 class. Dylan Stewart's from the 24 class. Colin Simmons is from the 24 class. Sammy Brown is from the 24 class. Breontae Johnson's from the 24 class. KJ Bolden's from the 24 class. And, of course, Leonard Moore's. Kingston Viliama-Asa is from the 24 class. He might be having more conversation about some of these things if he didn't have the knee injury.
Agreed.
But at the end of the day, I'm going Leonard Moore as the best defensive player in college football.
Yeah, I also went with Leonard Moore on this one as well. I think he's clear cut above the rest, but it was very, very difficult. I was down between him and Colin Simmons. And it's like, okay, which has more of an impact? Is it a premier edge rusher or a premier corner? Basically, is it the best edge rusher in the game right now, or is it the best cornerback in the game right now? And with the elevation that I think we're going to see in wide receiver play and at quarterback play this year, I went with the cornerback route. But if somebody wants to push back and say that it's Colin Simmons, you're not going to get a ton of pushback from me. I'm going with Leonard Moore, but I get it. You know what I mean?
Can I just say something here real quick? We are talking about Notre Dame's 24 class, and we're talking about how the national people view the 24 class and all these different things. And it just kind of got me thinking about why I don't put a lot of stock in recruiting rankings. 247 Sports had Notre Dame's 2024 recruiting class ranked 10th in the country. The 24 recruiting class that had C.J. Carr, Neas Williams, Kedron Young, Kirby Lambert, Anthony Knapp, Bryce Young, Kingston Viliama-Asa, Leonard Moore, Breontae Johnson. I'm just saying, this is why I don't put a lot of stock in recruiting class. And we told you guys at the time, this is an elite top 3 to 5 recruiting class. I don't care what the recruiting rankings say. And it's been proven to be true.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just nationally, that was a great class. Great class. Nationally. Think of the guys that we've mentioned so far today. C.J. Carr, top quarterback. We both picked 24 class. Isaac Brown, top running back. I believe he's also from the 24 class. Jeremiah Smith, receiver, 24 class. Colin Simmons, 24 class. Sammy Brown, 24 class. Leonard Moore, 24 class. KJ Bolden, 24 class. Cam Coleman, 24 class. That class was legit, Trevor. That was a great class.
I have it written down in my notes here. I'm going to have an article coming out this weekend about how the 24 recruiting cycle is going to run college football this year.
Oh, yeah. That's a great article idea. I love that. I really love that. Yeah. There's no question. Yeah, it was a great class. I mean, and there's some potential breakouts from that class. Ellis Robinson, we talked about, was he going to be a guy that can maybe challenge Leonard Moore? He's from that class. Ryan Williams is from that class. Justin Ross, who's expected to do some things this year, is Justin Scott. You named Justin Scott as your top defensive tackle in the class. He's from that class. Jordan Seaton is in the conversation as one of the best tackles in college football. He's in that class. David Stone, I mentioned as a potential. He's one of my candidates for the top D tackle in the country. He was from that class. Julian Sain was a Heisman finalist last year as a sophomore. He's from the 24 class. TJ Moore from Clemson and Bryant Westcott from Clemson. I saw an article from Jordan Reed at ESPN about the top, first round draft prediction. He has Chris Cole, the linebacker from Georgia. He's a first round pick. Bryce Young is from that class. I mean, there's a very long list of absolute. Ryan Wingo, Edric Houston, who you talked about being a potential breakout player. Elijah Griffin, who was my SEC breakout player on defense, is from the 24 class. That class was insanely, insanely good. Mike Matthews, who had a breakout year last year for Tennessee at wide receiver, was from that class. Trey Green, who a lot of people view as the top tight end in college football. We think he might be the top NFL draft pick at tight end. He's from that class. That class was insanely one of the best I've ever seen, and it hasn't even played its junior year yet. It's really insane how good that class is. Absolutely insane how good that class is.
It's absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. So what gave me the idea to write the article? And it's like in some of the cases, people are like, well, yeah, no, duh, the junior class is going to run college football this year. It's like, no, this is a different level of stardom that we're going to see from this class. And so it's going to be a fun write. I'm excited to break into it. Brian, to kind of wrap up the national superlatives, we talked about how we're not going to break down like every single national award, but we are going to talk about two. We're going to talk about the Heisman Trophy and the Coach of the Year, and we're going to start with the Heisman Trophy. There's a lot of discussion around who this could be, a lot of viable candidates, but I have a feeling we went the same direction here with Heisman Trophy. Who'd you go with?
You did. Look, the Heisman Trophy often goes to the best quarterback on the best team in college football, who also produces. And I think the best team in college football this year will be Notre Dame. I think their quarterback, CJ Carr, will produce, and I think he will be a legit Heisman contender. I also think that CJ has all the things you need, in my opinion, to win a Heisman at a place like Notre Dame. Are you an elite team? Yes. Are you going to put up numbers? Yes. Do you have a reputation? Yes. Do you have late season matchups that you can shine in big moments to kind of show the yes? In 6 of his last games, in 3 of the 6 last games, they're playing a team that's a preseason top 20 team. And in each of those cases, it's another name quarterback. So he's going to get a go toe-to-toe with Bear Bachmeier on the road. He's going to get a go toe-to-toe with Kevin Jennings. He's going to get a go toe-to-toe with Darian Mensah. There's an opportunity that he could be going toe-to-toe in the last game of the year with a guy who's battling for the most yards in college football award in Steve Angeli. So there's going to be opportunities for CJ Carr to have those back-to-back duels or those head-to-head duels against other top quarterbacks. Big game moments, all of it, all the makings are there for CJ Carr to be a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender. And since I think this, so I've complained about this in the past, the Heisman Trophy tends to go to the best quarterback on the quarterback of the best team. And I think CJ Carr is the quarterback of the best team in college football.
I'm with you completely. We have the exact same person for all those same reasons. I echo the same sentiment about the Coach of the Year. I went with Marcus Freeman. If Notre Dame is going to be the team we believe them to be, and I'm not trying to give too much away because we're talking about season predictions on Friday, but if Marcus Freeman is the coach to bring home the 12th national title to Notre Dame and have the best team in college football, I don't know how you can give the award to anybody else. And so I'm going with Marcus Freeman wins the Coach of the Year trophy. I know there's several. I know there's a bunch, but I have Marcus Freeman as my Coach of the Year in college football.
I got to row the boat, man. I'm kidding. Marcus Freeman's my pick as well.
I was about to say, you liar. You told me we had the same.
It's bold strategy there, Trev. You sit on a throne of lies.
Oh, man. I was about to say, ain't no way you're rowing the boat. Not for Coach of the Year. I respect that, though. That's funny. Brian, to take us home here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We have a daily mailbag to take us the rest of the way, geared towards the topics we discussed today. We discussed a lot of fun ones, superlatives for Notre Dame's players on offense and defense. We also talked about national superlatives, top quarterbacks, top running backs. Get your questions in, MB for mailbag, mailbox emoji lets us know to set those questions aside. Super chats get bumped up to the top as always.
Speaking of that, we do have a super chat to get us started off with, Trev.
Appreciate you. Super chat from Gavin Schmavin. Player prediction: Christian Gray scores the first touchdown for Notre Dame in 2026.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. I'll take that. I would like to point out that the last two great seasons at Notre Dame, like where they were like, wow, all year, championship caliber, 93 and 88. I'd like to point out that in both of those seasons, you can maybe point to 1989 as well. That's a conversation to have as well. But the first touchdown of the season was not an offensive touchdown. Ricky Waters' punt return in 1988 against Michigan was the first offensive touchdown of the season. And then in 1993, Pete Bursich on the first drive of the game had a pick six against Northwestern as the first score of the season for Notre Dame in 1993. So just want to point that little tidbit out there. Their first touchdown in 1988, I believe, was an offensive touchdown. So and that was in the game against Virginia. Or 1989 was against Virginia, but 88 and 93, years where the regular season ended, where you said that's the best team in college football, despite what the voters said. 88-93, they did not start the season off with an offensive touchdown. So I can get behind that, Gavin Schmavin. And it would be great for Christian Gray to do it, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no, though, because I would rather him score the last touchdown of the 2026
I get that.
season.
Well, what about first and last, Trev? You know, if you're not first, you're last. I'm just saying, you know, I don't know how that applies here, but it sounded good. I would also like to say, too, that Notre Dame has a little bit of a track record of scoring pick sixes against Wisconsin. They got 3 of them against Wisconsin in 2021. So, yeah, a little bit of a track record there.
From Sine Cosine Tangent, when was the last time there were 2 Heisman finalists from the same team?
2025. Right? No, Jeremiah Smith wasn't a Heisman finalist, was he, last year?
No. Was Mac Jones and Devontae Smith Heisman finalists in 2020?
They finished 1 and 2. 23 new. Yeah, 2020. Yeah, I think they finished 1 and 2. Let me see here. There's been years where that's happened. USC had that in 2005. No, Trevor Lawrence finished 2, and then Mac Jones finished 3 in 2020. I don't know if Chase Young was a finalist in 2019. He was finished 4th, but I don't know if he was invited to the ceremony. I have to let me look at this up. It's 19 Heisman Trophy finalists, because finalists are the guys that are invited to New York. Yeah, so 19, you did have Chase Young was invited in 19, it looks like. And so it was him and Justin Fields. So we had one in 19 and 20, and I don't see 2 since then. Yeah, don't see 2 since then. So we've seen that. We've seen that before. That's not completely uncommon. Back-to-back years in 19 and 20. So there you go. I wonder, let me see here. 2016, let me see who the Heisman finalists were. I think that was the year maybe they only had 3 guys there, because they always have 4. Sometimes only have 3. Oh, it's D.D. Westbrook, so he was invited that year. Yeah, Baker Mayfield and D.D. Westbrook were both invited as well, it looks like. So, yep, not super uncommon.
From Irish Dragon, what would it take for a defensive player like Leonard Moore to win the Heisman when most quarterbacks are actively avoiding him?
It would, I mean, honestly, we have one true defensive player that's won a Heisman. It was a guy that returned punts and played offense. I don't know that a defensive player can win the Heisman. If Ndamukong Suh can't win it, if Aaron Donald can't win it, if Chase Young can't win, well, actually, Chase Young shouldn't have won it because Joe Burrow was insane that year. But like Julius Peppers, I mean, Champ Bailey, there's been also did play offense. You know, it's especially for a corner.
Yeah, if Manti couldn't win it, having 7 interceptions in 13 games as a linebacker can't win it. I mean, that's just...
I mean, look, let's be honest about something. If Charles Woodson was only a defensive player in 1997, he has 0 chance of beating Peyton Manning out for the Heisman Trophy. 0. 7 picks is fine. He has zero chance. He won the Heisman that year because he had 33 punt returns and a touchdown. He also had 11 catches for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns, and ran the ball for a touchdown. And it was some of those big moments. Like, he made plays in both of those areas against Ohio State in the game. So you got to do more than just play defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2024 when Travis Hunter won it, he won it because of what he did at wide receiver. He was the Bolitnikoff
Right.
Award winner in 24.
Right. It's a 1,000-yard receiver.
Yeah, Jahdae Barron won the Jim Thorpe Award that year, and then Kyle Kennard won the Bronco Nagurski Award for Best Defensive Player. So it doesn't go to just pure defensive players. I'm with you completely.
Yep.
Another one from Irish Dragon. Would you keep Premer in at tight end to the
end of the line of scrimmage?
End of the line of scrimmage, or flex him out for pass routes?
Both. I mean, look, right now he's going to do more of the flexing out stuff right now as a freshman. But look, one of the things I liked about Ian Premer is he is a guy you can attach to the end of the line of scrimmage and block and do some different things. But you do both of them. But I think as a true freshman, Irish Dragon, I think most of what we'll see from him would be as the number 2 tight end in a package where Flanagan is kind of the attach guy or the wing guy, and you're moving him around and lining him up in the slot or in the boundary, stuff like that. I think that's more of where you'll see him early. And then as he gets older and stronger and develops his blocking prowess, that's when you'll see him do all of it a little bit more. But yeah, you'll see him do it all eventually. But I think as a freshman, a lot of it'll be moving around, getting him off the line of scrimmage. I think that's what we'll see. Irish Dragon, we are not going to address this question because we will have some conversations about this question tomorrow during our bold prediction show. So let's get to this next one from Salty Virginia Peanuts.
Which game is likely to feature CJ Carr's top passing performance?
It's a good question.
I got my money on SMU.
Okay, I like that.
Because I think they're a good enough opponent that warrants CJ Carr playing for the majority of the game. But I don't think that they have like a secondary compared to Miami. It's not bad by any means, but I think he'll be able to take advantage of more things. And I think he's going to have significantly more time to throw against SMU than what he will against Miami as well. And
they sucked in covering the pass. I mean, they were 135th in the country last year in passing yards allowed per game.
Yeah.
So, it's fine. I love your rationale, Trev. I'm totally with that. But I actually think his best performance will be a game that he doesn't play for 4 quarters. And my evidence of that is last year. The most yards again he threw in the game was a game he played 2.5 quarters, and that was against Arkansas. I think Boston College. I think Notre Dame is going to come out and want to throttle Boston College this year for how last year's game went. I think Boston College is going to be a team that's on the ropes. Their offense is going to be bad, and they had a bad pass defense last year. He threw over the top on them last year. I think it'll be that game or it'll be the Stanford game. Those are my 2 predictions of games because I could see Stanford, maybe Notre Dame's defense, makes a couple mistakes. Maybe they're not locked in or whatever, and maybe Stanford can do some things. But even if it's just like Arkansas where Notre Dame is just rolling them, I could see CJ having 350 yards. And I think that's a game I think CJ is going to look at and be like, yeah, I want something for that game because I missed a lot of opportunities in that game. It didn't play great in that game against him last year. Knowing how competitive he is, I just have a feeling like one of his big games or his monster games are going to be against somebody he maybe didn't necessarily play great against last year. That's why BC is really high up on that list, and that's why Stanford. CJ actually played well against BC. The offense didn't. But Stanford, he didn't play great against them. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't great. Sure. And so I could see him lighting one of those 2 teams up. That's also why I think he's going to play really well against Miami, as long as he doesn't put too much pressure on himself.
I like that. Another one from Salty. Which game is likely to feature the highest rushing total for the Irish?
It's a great question. I'm trying to just think of some of the games. Rice.
Yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, Rice or Purdue.
I have I have all the faith in the world that Marcus Freeman's going to leave no doubt, but I don't think that means airing it out even with the second team.
Yeah.
Rice is just significantly the inferior opponent skill-wise. They'll just run them to death. It would not shock me if they rush for over 300 yards that game. In no way would that shock me.
And look, you're gonna throw the ball with your backups. It doesn't mean you're still not going to rip off long runs. I mean, Notre Dame allowed Steve Angeli to throw the ball, and I believe Kenny Minchie also threw a pass against Purdue in 2024. If I remember correctly, Trev. I believe I'm going to look it up now, but I know that Steve did. He threw that touchdown pass to Cooper Flanagan, and then also threw a deep ball to oh gosh, I can't remember who he threw a deep ball to in that game as well. But he threw a couple other deep balls that didn't get caught. Remember, he threw one to KK that KK couldn't bring down. I mean, they threw the ball in that game against Purdue in 2024, but Notre Dame still ran for 362 yards on them. You know what I mean? Like it's you're still going to run the ball. I mean, throw the ball in those instances, but you're still going to run it all over them. I mean, you look at the Arkansas game last year, Trev. Notre Dame threw for a ton of yards that game, and they let Kenny throw the ball. He threw the deep ball to Matt Jeffrey in that game, but they still ran for over 200 yards that game. And I think it's going to be Purdue or Rice. Still going to give those quarterbacks a chance to throw the ball a little bit, but you're not going to have them going in there and going down on an 8-play drive of 7 passes. It's going to be like 5-2 or something like that, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm with you on that. It'll be somebody that's not good.
Kenny Minchie also did throw a pass against Purdue in 24. He went 1 for 1 for 4 yards.
Well, that was near the goal line, if I remember correctly. Did he throw a touchdown pass in that game? No, that wasn't.
I thought he ran a touchdown.
Bauman?
Oh, no. Steve threw the one to – right? I thought Steve threw the pass to Kevin Bauman.
You could be right. Because did Steve throw 2 touchdown passes in that game? So I thought he had a touchdown. I thought Kevin Bauman had a touchdown pass in that game. I could be incorrect on that, but I thought he did. But, yeah, Steve threw 2 touchdowns in that game. So, yeah, Cooper and Kevin Bauman.
Question in here from Andy Wine and Cheese. Which position group would benefit the most from one under-the-radar player having a breakout season?
This one's actually kind of easy for me. It's either A, wide receiver, a Micah Gilbert, a Cam Williams, and Elijah Burris, somebody that we're not talking as much about as Greathouse and Faison and Mylan Graham, and the offseason talk about Quincy Porter, somebody like that. And then the other one to me is D tackle. Like we talked about, in Armel Mukum having a big-time breakout year, and Elijah Hughes or somebody like that having a big breakout year. And I would also argue that you could actually, from under the radar, you could talk about anybody on this team other than maybe Tion Gray being under the radar D tackle, because we just don't talk about the D tackles because there's so much else to talk about on this team. Yep. You talk about the ends and the linebackers and the DBs. Like we don't hear a lot of talk about their D tackles. But pick Francis Brew. Kind of hard to. I don't know that he's under the radar because he's on the freaks list. He was all ACC last year and all that. But like Onye, Armel, somebody like that being the breakout, that would have a big impact.
Yeah, I like that. My pick was the wide receiver room. I mean, it's good to talk about in the offseason what the potential of how deep they are, because they are. But now that the season is 11 days away from kicking off, they're not going to roll into Wisconsin and play 11 wide receivers. Now it's time to start carving out, okay, what is the true rotation going to look like? And if an unsung guy starts coming up and making a push, it raises the ceiling. I'm with you completely.
I dig it. Let's get to another one here from Father J. Pop.
Does a Quincy Porter getting healthy in October change any of the wide receiver predictions? Long touchdowns, most touchdowns, etc.
No. If he's not playing till October, he won't have the most touchdowns. And I don't view him as necessarily like he's going to come in and be like a bunch of 78-yard receptions. Quincy Porter is in the same category as Charles Jagasaw for me. When I see him out on the practice field running around and looking like the player he was in high school, then I'll be a believer that he's going to have an impact in Notre Dame for this year. But until then, he just had another procedure on his knee. They can say it's about cleaning up and all that, and it is. But if you're cleaning it up, it means there's a continued problem, and that's not a good sign. So I'm not trying to give medical advice. I'm simply saying that history, we don't see a whole lot of this kind of stuff. So we're going to, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I'm with you.
Yeah. If he does it, great. Let's get another one from Father J Pop.
Is there anything from Partridge's past training of defensive tackles, Mookum Strong Camp, which made you think about predicting Mookum or Onye for the high sack number in a game, player a la Tillery?
Yeah, the last school he was at, they had an All-American D tackle who went on to be a first-round draft pick, and Kalijah Cansey. And look, he's a similar player to Armel. Short, stout. Armel's not short, but he's not tall. He's like 6'3", 295, quick. Vertically athletic, powerful hands, disruptive potential. He's that kind of player. And Kalijah Cansey at Pitt was 6', 280. And he coached under Coach Barks, had 30 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. The year before, 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. In 2020, he had 7 tackles for loss. So, we've seen that from him. Players that have a similar skill set. Body type is similar build, but Armel's bigger. But yeah, so we've seen him produce some big time players on the defensive line in the past at Pitt, and a little bit different at Wisconsin because they ran a different type of defense at Wisconsin. They were more of a 3-down defense at Wisconsin during his tenure there. But yeah, we've seen some big time players. And what was Rashad Weaver was an end. They had another good D tackle in the late 2000s, the teens. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't Rashad Weaver. I think Rashad Weaver was an end. But I have to look that one up. But yeah, we've seen it. He's got a track record of producing those type of players. But it's also more so of just us seeing Armel and what he's been doing on a consistent basis, and just the different vibes and buzz that we've heard from people. That's more of where it's at. And speaking of, Salty asked, will Armel Mookum have a national breakout this season? We talked about him earlier. Can he? Yes. But part of the reason I didn't go with him is because there's still a level of, I love what I'm hearing, but now I need to see it. Where with Bryce, we've kind of seen flashes of it before. Now it's just about him putting it all together.
Yes, agreed completely. With Bryce, there are specific things that we can point to of, hey, you got to finish better. You had 29 total pressures last year and 2 sacks. There is something that I can point. It's kind of like, for anybody that golfs in the chat, it's like, have you ever gone golfing with somebody who it's like, they're just actively missing the ball, and then they're asking you what they need to do better, and it's like, make contact. I need to see you make contact before I can fix anything with your swing. You know what I mean? Whereas with me, when I first got started, I had no issue making contact with the ball. It's just it was duck hooking, it was slicing, and it's like, hey, what do I need to fix? There's a sample size that I provided whoever I was golfing with to give them something to work with. With Armel, it's kind of like, I need to see you on a more consistent basis on the field before I can predict a national breakout to say, if you do this, this, and this, I think you'll be a national breakout candidate, whereas we've seen that with Bryce.
Yep, I'm with you on that. We do have a super chat, but I'm going to bring that up at the end because it's more of a wrap up the show type of super chat. So NDM Moore, who did the super chat, we do appreciate that, but I think this is it's definitely a great end of this mailbag super chat. Let's get to this one from Andrew Gilmore.
Who do you think the best coordinator hire was this offseason? How do you rate Clemson's hire at offensive coordinator going back to Chad Morris?
Number one, I with all the turnover that we saw in staffs this year, I don't know that there's one hire that I could point to and say, oh, that. There wasn't that one proven, nobody went out and got Bryant Haynes. Nobody went out and got Corey Heatherman or Mike Denbrock or, the big coordinator moves were guys that were going from coordinators to head coaches, Will Stein, for example. So, you could talk about Charlie Weiss Jr., but he's the offensive coordinator. But as we know, Lane Kiffin still has a big role in calling plays. There's a couple for me that I liked. Jim Knowles, can he do something he's never done before and actually get a defense to play really well in year one? There's talent to work with there. I did like that hire. I think the Buster Faulkner hire at Florida was a great hire. We've seen some guys, though, struggled to transition to coaching in the SEC in the past. Is that the same case now? Well, we'll see. I'm curious about that one. I don't know how Arthur Smith is going to do. I'm not an NFL guy, so I can't tell you what he will or won't do, other than just I know some things I've heard about, more 12 personnel and things like that, which I think could fit into there. Chip Kelly at Northwestern, was a good hire. I think that Kyle Whittingham had two good hires. Jason Beck he brought with him from Utah. I think it was a great hire. Going out and getting Jay Hill from BYU was a really good hire. So there was a lot of good picks like that. I'll tell you who made a really sneaky good hire too this offseason is Fran Brown, getting Vince Karras from Toledo, former head coach at Mount Union, who's a really good defensive coordinator. Shows me he understands we've got to stop people. We can't just go score 45 points a game. We've got to stop people. I think that was a really underrated hire from Fran Brown and someone who has head coaching experience. I understand it was at the Division III level, but it was at a really, really good coach. And he kind of spent his whole life watching one of the best to ever do it, his dad. You know what I mean? And then Vince has gone and made a name for himself. I mean, he won championships at Mount Union, and he's done a really nice job as the D coordinator under Jason Candle at Toledo. So, there were a lot of good hires. I think Coach Sanders hiring Brendan Marion to run his offense can't be worse than what it was before. I think that's a good hire. Brent Pry is the D coordinator at Virginia Tech were good hires as well. I'm going to talk about a hire, though, that I talked a little bit about yesterday that I just think is a really sneaky good hire, and that's Gordon Samus at TCU. I really like what that guy did at UConn, and I'm very curious to see what he can do while working with Sonny Dykes, who's also a great offensive mind. So usually it's like a guy emerges under Sonny Dykes and then goes somewhere else and struggles. Garrett Riley. This is a guy that made a name for himself somewhere else, and now he's coming to work and pair with Sonny Dykes. And so I'm very, very curious. And you know what's awesome about that talk, Trev? We're going to get to see him coach in 3 days, baby. TCU, North Carolina on Saturday. I'm excited to see what he can do with Jaden Craig at quarterback. So I think that was a sneaky good hire. Before we talk about Chad Morris, Trev, any others that you look at and say, hey, I really like that hire in college football this year?
No, the one that I was going to talk about was Brent Pry coming back to Virginia Tech. I think that was a vet move by James Franklin. It helps instill the culture there, and I think Brent Pry is going to be in his wheelhouse, going back to just focusing on the defensive side of the ball instead of running a program. So that was mine.
It's a good one. Now, Chad Morris, look, I don't know how good of a hire that's going to be. I know that he was a pass game coordinator at Texas State 2 years ago, and they did very, very well, and he had a lot of success at Clemson. He kind of laid the offensive foundation for what was to come. But at the same time, I mean, can he look, Coach Sweeney's trying to go and restore the magic that he had in the heyday at Clemson, right? When they were winning titles and all those type of things. And as I mentioned, Chad Morris was a big part of getting that started. I respect Chad Morris a lot for taking last year off. Do you know what he was doing all year? You know, Trev. But do you guys know what Chad Morris was doing all year? Watching his son, Chandler Morris at Virginia, starting quarterback at Virginia. He said, you know what, I'm going to be a dad for this year. And I think it worked out really well for him. So I respected that, but will it work? I honestly don't know. I don't. He hasn't been a full-time offensive coordinator. What was Auburn in 2020 during the COVID year? Yeah, prior to that, he was a head coach at Arkansas, head coach at SMU. I mean, really, the last time he was in a real OC job was at Clemson in 2014.
I feel very similar about the Chad Morris hire that I do about the Will Muschamp hire at Texas. How do you adjust to the new game, the modern game? And I know it's not like they were coordinators back in the 80s and now they have to be coordinators again in 2026. But I'm hoping that Dabo Swinney isn't just expecting him to come in and be like, well, hey, this is what worked for us in 2015 with Deshaun Watson, so go do that again. Because the game's a little bit different. So that's how I do think
Bobby Petrino's a great offensive mind, but I would never hire that guy. And not even about just the checkered pass, but I'd always be worried about that guy stabbing me in the back and trying to undermine me and take my job. But great offensive mind. So if North Carolina is going to get it turned around, that was a good one. Will Muschamp's another one like Chad Morris. I don't know how that's going to go. It's been a while since he's ran a defense. And so there's just a lot of those things that I look at, Trev, and say that could end up being a great hire. Gary Patterson at USC could end up being a great hire. I have no idea. it just there's a lot of things that go into that. Illinois hired Bobby Hauck as their new defensive coordinator. I mean, he was a really, really good head coach for a long time. So we'll see. We'll see. There were some very interesting hires this offseason. What's Chip Kelly going to do with Aiden Childs at Northwestern? I'm very intrigued to see how that one goes. Well, Chris Koldalnick or Andy Koldalnicki going back to Kansas with Lance Leopold. How's that one going to go? Some very intriguing offseason coordinator hires. I couldn't just pick one that's like, oh, wow. You know, there's a lot of intriguing ones. Very intriguing ones.
From Salty, which game is most likely to feature Ian Premer's breakout receiving performance, if any?
I honestly have no idea. Until we know what his role is and those type of things, I honestly have no idea. I couldn't tell you. Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea either. Another one from Salty. Will Leonard Moore win the Chuck Bednarik Award?
He's got a shot. I mean, that goes to the best defensive player in college football, and we both think he's the best defensive player in college football. And it's not just two Notre Dame guys on the Notre Dame channel thinking that. I mean, just nationally, he has that perception. And I've always felt winning these awards, a lot of times there needs to be some level of you're known coming into the season. Now, sometimes that can work against you because people will pick you apart, but it also gives you, if you play well, gives you a good foundation to say, well, he was the best, and he's played like the best. I think if I had to pick, I think it'll be him or one of the DNs. Would be my pick, unless like a Sammy Brown, Xavier Atkins type of linebacker, Ben Roberts has like a monster year. Could certainly have a chance there.
Yeah, I would either say that, or another potential big stumbling block is that you just kind of get the random like breakout from a player not being talked about. Like if a random linebacker from Tennessee just has a nasty year, and because people either love the known commodity or like the brand new guy type of thing. So I could see that being a stumbling block as well.
Yep. Couple more here before we get out of here. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one.
Will Notre Dame be this year's Joe Moore Award winner?
It's a great question. I will say this. We've talked a lot about that this offseason, Trev. Do they have a chance to have that honor? Yes, they do. Should they have that honor? They definitely should at least be a finalist. And if they're not, there's some issues going on. Like, there are. We got to figure out what, if you're Marcus Freeman, he's like, hey, we got to figure out why we're not able to produce better offensive line play. And at some point in time, you got to stop using injuries as the reason why. This is the year that's got to happen. And if it doesn't, then there's a problem. But I'm hoping that we see that this year. I think it's certainly capable of that. And certainly they're going to be battle tested because, I mean, what they've been going against every day in fall camp so far is just been tremendous with the talent that they're going against every day in practice. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the O-line can do. Will they win it? Sure. Let's go with that. I think, if they're 12-0, they're going to have a great shot to do that, but I would think the O-line will play that. But like, to a degree, I still need to see it. I still need to see it a little bit. A couple things before we get out of here. Sorry, Trev, did you want to?
I was being snarky. I said, well, they're already on the watch list.
Yes, that was great, by the way. For those who maybe don't catch that, Trev talked about this the other day. The Joe Moore Award released their watch list, and it literally had every team in college football, which I actually kind of liked that. I maybe in my head, I'm taking them as that's like a bit of a jab. Like maybe the other awards where it's like you're picking and choosing who you're going to talk about. Like, and some of them are just like, why do you have all those kind of players? They're like, hey, everyone's on the watch list. We're going to figure it out once we play games. I kind of liked that. If they meant it how I'm taking it, I kind of liked it. It's kind of pithy. I like it. All right. Or petty, I should say. Real quick from Indy Wine and Cheese, any word on having a potential tailgate for Rice? Yeah, it's not going to work out for my parents to be able to come in town, so I don't think we're going to do a tailgate that weekend. But we are definitely having one the next weekend against Michigan State. We're definitely doing one on November 7th for the Miami game. So also, if anybody has a Joyce parking lot that you're willing to sell to me, shoot me an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com, BRYAN@irishbreakdown.com, because I am looking to buy a couple Joyce parking lot passes for the Michigan State and the Miami games. I'm actually willing to buy one for the entire season if someone's willing to sell it. But if you have that, shoot me an email at brian@irishbreakdown.com. And then finally, Trevor, we have a super chat from Andy M. Moore, which I think is a great way for us to end the show.
Appreciate the super chat. Want to express gratitude for all the hard work everyone at Irish Breakdown put into this extended offseason. Notre Dame is going to make a statement on September 6th.
Amen, brother. Can't wait for it. I appreciate you. Appreciate you very much, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, it's going to do it for us here today in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Beat at 5:05 p.m. talking about some of Mike Denbrock's comments from yesterday's post-practice press conference. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at noon with our bold predictions. Definitely a show you are not going to want to miss. It's going to be a ton of fun. Going to be a lot of fun to put together and talk about. On your way out of this show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. See you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.